it's time to sit back and relax with your favorite drink. And listen. Bell towers have played an important role in human history for centuries, and their significance can be seen in various cultural, religious, and historical contexts. In many cultures, bell towers were constructed as part of religious buildings such as churches, cathedrals, and temples. The ringing of the bells served as a call to prayer and signaled important moments in religious services such as the start and end of Mass or the announcement of a wedding or funeral. But bell towers were also used as a means of communication and warning. In medieval Europe, they were used to announce the approach of enemies or the outbreak of fires. Similarly, in many coastal communities, bell towers were used to signal approaching storms or to alert fishermen to incoming tides. Another historical significance of bell towers is their role in timekeeping. Before the widespread availability of clocks and watches, bells were used to mark the passage of time, particularly in towns and cities where large numbers of people lived and worked. The bell tower, in tonight's story, does none of these, as we shall see in this epic trilogy brought together for the very first time here. There's an old bell tower near my house. It's strictly forbidden to enter. Now I know why. By Reggae Junkie Gee. Part 1. Have you ever heard of the Bell Witch? I hadn't until one of my friends at school told me a few years ago as we passed through the woods near my town. There was a good spot there next to a stream where we used to hang out with our group of friends. In the other direction, there was an old church which was mostly just a foundation with parts of walls still standing and a huge bell tower that still stood intact. We were always told to never go near it by our parents. Our parents were told by their parents and, well, you get the idea. Now I know this is Scotland and the Bell Witch was in Tennessee, but the stories and legends of this bell tower have similarities to the Bell Witch Cave. My friend Brian told me about Bell Witch Cave and said that it was the same entity who haunted the old bell tower. How or why was never included in the story, and I never did believe any of it anyway, although the tower had always piqued my curiosity. We'd never gone against our parents' wishes before. However, on a cold February in 2017, a few weeks before my 14th birthday, curiosity got the better of our young, overactive minds, and it seemed like a great idea at the time, as we found ourselves suddenly buying torches with our own pocket money and gathering supplies for a little urban adventure. My friend Brian wanted to go at night. Well, I wasn't exactly into that. We came to an agreement that we'd go during the day to check it out, and then maybe decide whether we wanted to return for a nighttime visit. I want to be clear that it wasn't because I was scared of some ghost story or some legend. It's because there could have been literally any weirdo in those woods prowling around for whatever reason. We were just young teenagers. I don't think we could have fought off any psychotic maniacs that like to hang around the woods alone at night. My name's Danny. Brian was, still is, my best friend. He just turned 15, and our other friend Liam was older. He was 16. He grew up next door to Brian, and he's always been kind of our leader, like the one we'd look up to. He was a tall, cool kid, popular in school and had a girlfriend. I really found myself always wanting to be like Liam, but in reality I was nowhere near. I was short and kind of overweight. Brian was too, in fact. We were a bit of a mismatch of friends, but we always stuck together. We had a pretty random bag of supplies, but you can never really know what you might end up needing. We had torches that we just bought, a lighter and 4 candles Brian took from his house. I took my dad's hammer for protection, though I can't imagine any one of us actually having the guts to use it. A flat-headed screwdriver to pick locks, some snacks and juice, a camera and some pens and paper. Thinking we could maybe map it out or something. I don't know. I hadn't really thought it through too much, to be honest. We all hail from a smallish town called Fort William in the Highlands of Scotland. Near the north of the town, before you reach Ben Nevis, there are some old run-down buildings. Not many, but a few. Just through a small wood sits the old church ruin in a semi-clear area. It's fenced off with some signage declaring the building is a ruin, and it's dangerous, but the bell tower itself stands perfectly, as if it were constantly being restored. People have told me in the past, at obscure times in the night, or on a full moon, or sometimes at particular times on certain days of the year, you could sometimes hear the bells toll, as if they're in perfect working order, though the legends are pretty much all over the place and seem to bear little to no factual significance. History tells you the bells last chimed over 200 years ago, and I can also say, at the time, I'd never heard them myself, although I know of a few people who'd swear on their grave that they'd heard them multiple times throughout the years. It was a mild, clear Saturday afternoon when we took our trip to the bell tower, 1 or 2 p.m. if I remember correctly. Liam and Brian were able to climb the fence no problem after giving me a boost over. We stood looking at the bell tower. It must be 50, maybe even over 60 feet high. Oh, it's big, made from old, large 17th century ashlar stone and standing proudly next to the church foundations that have long since crumbled. The bell tower has no clock face. The bells were used as a call to prayer throughout the 17th and 18th centuries, from what I've gathered. And there are small rectangular windows on 3 of the 4 sides, leading all the way up to near the top. I've heard this is where clergy members and church volunteers or trustees would sometimes live, but also that it was used to house prisoners of the church who were waiting trial, primarily blasphemers and people accused of various crimes against the church that were regarded as evil, acting against God's will, or associated with some kind of witchcraft. Well, the history is very scarce. It's mostly vague and littered with stories or tales from unconfirmed sources, so we're really not sure what to expect inside. But what I have found is that between the late 16th and 17th century, up to 4,000 people were tortured and executed in Scotland as witches. As we stand there staring up at the walls of the tower, I couldn't help but feel a chill run down my spine, just thinking of what could possibly have gone on within these grounds. I mean, in my head it's all nonsense, but it doesn't take away from the fact that, at the end of the day, we really can't possibly know for sure what happened here all those years ago, and that tiny seed of doubt will not budge. We approached the door tentatively, looking all around for signs of life, not wanting to get caught. We had a large wooden door with a huge old-style lock that had been pulled out and a newer padlock higher up which had held it shut. I quickly drew the screwdriver out and put it into the keyhole of the padlock. It was way too big to go anywhere near it, and I felt defeated already. I didn't know how to pick locks, but I figured I could have at least tried. Well, Liam took the hammer and broke the lock after 3 hits. The padlock didn't break, but the latch did, and the door opened slightly. A cold, musty breeze escaped the tower and made my nose wrinkle. Oof, it smelled like damp and old stuff. Liam opened the door, and we followed him inside. A large wooden staircase spiraled upwards, leading to the rooms on each floor. There wasn't much other than the stairs and 1 room on the ground level. There was no door to this room, and we could see it was empty, aside from leaves and bird droppings and piles of rubble. We began to climb the stairs to the first floor. We could see all the way up in the center and counted 5 floors plus an extra stairway right at the top that led to the bells. The crumbling stairs made cracking noises with every step, but they felt safe. We were sure they'd hold us no problem, until we reached the first floor and saw about 10 or 12 steps lying crumpled in a heap that would lead us to the second floor. After seeing that, I felt myself being more careful on the centuries-old stone. Who knows if or when it could give way, and we didn't want to find out. On the second floor there were 2 rooms, each with another wooden door. Only one was padlocked shut. We went into the first room, an empty stone room with a small rectangular window at one end. There was nothing else of note. Liam burst the other door open and we entered. There were 2 windows boarded up, and it was really dark. We could see 2 old wooden bed frames, one mostly broken up. Oh, the chill in this room was bitter. The windows were lightly boarded up because they'd been smashed, and there was glass all over the floor. Liam and Brian walked out almost as quick as we'd walked in. I hovered around for a few seconds because I felt like something had me in its sights. In one of the corners I could almost make out what appeared to be a black mass, though it could have just been the darkness of the room. Even so, looking in that direction made my hair stand up, and I could feel adrenaline begin to flow through my body. I hastily left to find Liam and Brian assessing the stairway leading up. "We'll come back with a ladder," Liam exclaimed, looking up and down, judging the height. I think my dad has a ladder that should just make it. Brian stared at me, looking for me to agree. Okay, I replied, uncertainty in my voice. We coming back tomorrow then? I asked. Liam turned around, smiling. Nah, fuck that. Let's do it tonight. He looked at both Brian and I with excitement building in his face. Brian laughed. Sounds like a plan, and nodded in my direction. I was extremely dubious about this idea, but I didn't want to be the one to say no. I nodded at Brian and Liam, then quickly turned to make my way downstairs. I could hear them quietly relishing in the idea of this scary adventure as they began to follow me down. But the front door was closed. I tried opening it, but it wouldn't budge. I started to panic and shouted for them to hurry. Liam came first. What's wrong? He asked, looking at me and then the door. The door won't open, I choked. I felt like I wanted to cry. I felt like we were trapped here forever. Liam pushed the door and then gave it a shove with his shoulder. It swung open. I could feel the fear drain from my body instantly, as I now began to feel stupid. I looked sheepishly at both of them. It's just an old door. Calm yourself down, Danny, Brian said, stifling a laugh as he followed Liam outside. I felt like such a loser, panicking like that. We hopped the fence and began walking back. Since our exploration had been cut short, we found a park with some benches and ate our snacks while we planned out the night. We used the classic tactic of, I'm staying at Brian's, Liam's staying at my house, and Brian's staying with Liam. Then we'd meet up with our supplies and bikes before we headed back out at about 10 or 11 p.m. I don't know how Liam was going to sneak a ladder from his house. Well, that was his problem. Well, this was kind of his idea, so I could only hope he got caught and wasn't allowed to go. That night, at 9 p.m, I cycled out and met Brian at the end of the main street. We waited for Liam, who was notorious for being late. But to be fair, he had brought along a ladder on a bike. How difficult that could possibly be, I had no idea, so I gave him the benefit of the doubt. 20 or 25 minutes later, Liam showed up on his bicycle with his bag and ladderless. Where is it? Brian asked sharply. Oh, looks like we can't go now, I was thinking to myself, half ready to jump back on my bike. Oh, I carried it up earlier. I can't cycle with a fucking ladder hanging off me, he joked back, then smirked at me as if he knew all I wanted to do was just go home. Oh, are we doing this or what? Liam continued after a brief silence. Aye, let's go. Brian nodded to both of us. Brian led the way. Liam was behind and I was at the back, trying to take my time. I seriously had a bad feeling, but everything in me wanted to prove myself to them and to prove to myself that I wasn't scared. We rolled up to the fence and set our bikes against it. Same as before, we all hopped over with no problems. I did think at this time we should have brought some kind of bolt cutters or something to just cut a small slit and move the fence in case we had to get out fast or whatever reason. Oh, too late now, I suppose. Torches fired up, we made our way through the rotten wooden door, and instantly the ice-cold air pricked my skin as we entered. The air seemed different. The world was still, and complete silence fell on us as the wooden door shut behind us. We all stood looking up, the flights of crumbling stairs winding around the square building leading to the complete abyss above us. It made me shudder. Right, let's go, Liam said, just above a whisper as he grabbed the ladder that was leaning against the first set of stairs. We climbed up to the first floor, the 3 torchlights darting across the walls with every creak and rustle we heard. We came to the first floor with the 2 doors. Hey, did we check both of these rooms earlier? Brian asked. Liam replied, Yeah, but maybe have a quick look again just to make sure there's nothing there. Danny, you look in that first room. Brian, you check in there. He pointed to the room that had been padlocked before on the other side. I'll get the ladder set up. I looked at Brian, who was only too quick to amble over to his door and open it to glance inside. I saw him disappear into the black as I hesitantly turned to check the other room. I opened the door slowly and looked inside, shining my torch to the back walls and corners. I couldn't see anything. I felt safe enough with my torch, so I entered the room. The door swung shut behind me. I took one step to the left, behind where the door would open. "Welcome to hell, children," a loud, menacing voice cried from behind me. I jumped back and dropped my torch, the glowing red eyes on the head of what looked like a tall, slim, horrifying clown with the biggest smile on his face, his black and white checkered clothes soaked in blood as his head moved from side to side. Oh, my heart was racing. I couldn't scream, I couldn't move. I felt like "Step right up and get your tickets to hell." The head was moving side to side and the hands were moving back and forward. I was finally able to grab my torch after sliding myself away from the clown. "Oh, you fucking pricks," I screamed as I shone my torch on the clown. It was one of those standing clown Halloween decorations that are set off by movement. Brian and Liam burst into the room laughing their heads off. I was shaking with so much fear, but also with so much anger. "Fuck you two. I'm going home," I said, pulling myself to my feet. "Danny, it was just a joke. I'm sorry," Liam said, but still laughing like a madman. "That was just a wind-up, Danny. We won't do it again, I promise," Brian added, more sincere but still holding back his laughter. Well, I looked at both of them and just walked out, shaking my head. "Let's get this ladder up. Get this over and done with, then," I muttered as I approached the fallen stairs. Liam set the ladder to the lowest hanging part. It wouldn't be easy, but it was definitely doable. Standing on the top step of the ladder, the stair came to about chest height, with some rebar poking out from front and sides. Well, you could just grasp these bars and push yourself high enough to swing a leg up. Liam went first and immediately started climbing the stairs to the second floor. I went second, and then waited for Brian. We walked up together. Brian could tell I wasn't happy, so he tried to reassure me that there'd be no more messing around. I just wanted to go home. Didn't care anymore. We got to the second landing, and Liam was nowhere to be seen. I shot an accusing glance at Brian, and he just shrugged his shoulders. He was just as confused as me. There were 3 doors on this floor, one open and 2 closed. "I suppose we just walk into these rooms and wait for Liam to jump out on us or something," I said sarcastically, rolling my eyes. How fucking original. "Liam, just come out. We're not here to play games," Brian shouted towards the open door. We were shining our torches inside, but couldn't see anything. "Liam, just come out, man," I shouted next. A noise from behind us startled us both. The torches were immediately trained on the open door, as we turned so fast to see Liam standing in the open doorway. "I'm in here, idiots. Hurry up." Liam's voice came from the open room we were now glaring into, with a look of confusion. "Come and look at this," Liam said as he disappeared into the room. Brian started walking, and I grabbed his shoulder. "Hold on, Brian. What the fuck? Why was that other door opening? There must be someone in there," I said sternly, but my voice was trembling. It was probably just the wind. Nobody can get up the stairs, remember? Brian shrugged my hand from his shoulder then, as he turned to follow Liam into the other room. All sorts of horrors were racing through my overactive mind, but in the end I followed behind Brian. He was probably right. As soon as I set a foot into the room, "Hey, Danny!" a cold whisper echoed from behind me. I almost snapped my neck as I turned and shot my torch over to the door on the other side of the landing. The torchlight glided along the wall as I turned. Just as it met the door, the door quietly clicked shut. Part 2. Liam sniggered. "Look at this." There was a pile of dead birds lying in various states of decomposition by the window. "Oh, that's rancid, man," Brian said, covering his nose and mouth. I stood a few steps behind, shaking. The light from my torch was visibly vibrating on the wall. Nobody noticed, but I was terrified. Brian and Liam were talking, but I couldn't focus. I felt myself being drawn to the room across the hall, like my very soul was being slowly pulled by some unknown force. Time seemed to slow to almost a complete halt, and voices echoed around my head. "Danny!" A voice came from the abyss, forming before my eyes. "Danny!" Everything returned to normal in a flash as I saw Brian and Liam staring at me, confused. I felt faint. "Danny, you okay?" I'm fine. Just felt a bit dizzy," I said, feeling like my legs were about to give way. "I'll be okay. Let's just get this over with." Liam sniggered again at Brian and patted his back as if to say, "What's his problem?" I took no notice and left the room. The others followed behind into the hallways where we stayed for a few short minutes. "Let's try that other room then." It was Brian that broke the silence. "The one we thought Liam was in earlier. We should at least look in since you thought someone was in there." He continued, nodding in my direction. He began walking with Liam in tow towards the room opposite. I hesitantly followed. I didn't want to go, but I didn't want to be by myself. They tried the handle and tried barging the door, but it would not yield. "It must be barricaded shut somehow. There's no lock," Liam said, looking the door up and down. "Let's just head upstairs." I stared at the door, knowing full well it was opening itself earlier. I saw it shut with my own eyes. Brian saw it opening too, but he just wasn't acknowledging the fact that this didn't make any sense. He turned and followed Liam like an obedient puppy to the stairway without saying a word. I was hot on their heels as we began to climb the old stairs. Pieces of concrete from the stairs were crumbling and falling on the floor below with every step. We made it to the 3rd floor. 2 rooms on this landing, both without doors. It smelled like shit up here, although the whole place smelled like shit, to be honest. Immediately, a scraping sound could be heard from the room on the left, like metal on stone. I pulled the hammer from the bag and held it out in front of me, ready for whatever may come at us. Liam just chuckled. "Put that away, Danny. You couldn't swing it if you wanted to." He glanced at Brian for approval, but Brian's eyes were fixed on the blackened doorway. A slow, continuous, rhythmic clicking sound began coming from the dark room. Our torches weren't powerful enough to illuminate the inside. They seemed to be reaching the doorway and then losing all light to the darkness beyond. Well, Liam didn't seem fazed. I couldn't tell if he was hearing the same things as us. "So, we just standing here then?" Liam asked sarcastically. "What's up with you two?" "Do you hear that, Brian?" I murmured, ignoring Liam completely. Brian nodded, eyes wide and trained on the doorway. Liam scoffed. "Oh, very good. Well, I'm going to look in here. If you're both too scared, then wait out here." Liam walked toward the door, getting slower as he got closer. I could tell his brave streak was quickly dissipating. He did continue through, though, albeit cautiously. Liam disappeared into the darkness. Brian looked at me and tilted his head toward the door. "Come on. We can't leave him. We need to go in, man." Ryan started toward the darkness, the light from his torch disappearing unnaturally the same way Liam had as he'd crossed the threshold. I let out a huge sigh and began walking forward, the ominous click still reverberating in my ears. I entered the black room. The torch wasn't much use. I could only see a couple of feet in front of me. But the room felt huge. I crept around for ages without finding a wall, and the doorway, acting like a safety beacon, seemed to be getting smaller as I continued on. "Oh, fuck off," Brian yelped as I bumped into him. "Oh, sorry, I didn't see you," I said, placing a hand on his shoulder. "Where the hell is he?" "No idea. I can't see jack shit in here, Brian replied, sounding agitated. The room appeared to be filled with a thick black fog that impaired our vision, and also our ability to see very far using the torch. The clicks seemed to be getting louder. I really didn't want to follow them, but it was the only source of anything in this room. We had to at least find a wall. I startled myself as I bumped into the stone wall. It felt cold and wet, almost slimy. "Found a wall. Just follow it," I said, with my hand still on Brian's shoulder. I guided him along the wall, torches in front of us the whole time. The torches still struggled to cut through the darkness, but only a few feet away I could begin to make out that we were approaching a corner. Adrenaline pumped through my veins and my skin turned to ice, as I also noticed there was a dark figure standing in the corner. "Liam?" I stammered, inching closer, praying this was just another joke. We were close enough now I could make out the clothes and hair. It was him, but what the hell was he doing? "Liam, stop it. We found you. Ha ha, great joke. Stop being a dick." The figure turned to face us. I could just about make out the white eyes and an expressionless face. It was Liam, but, well, he seemed really off. The light completely died on mine and Brian's torches now, and we were immediately plunged into the deepest black you could ever imagine. We were frozen in fear, and the room was dead silent. You could literally hear a pin drop. And then, from the corner in front, a scraping sound, and some scratching noises inching closer to us. I looked back at our safety beacon at the doorway, and saw someone standing there too. We had no way out. The scraping and scratching getting slowly closer, and a deep menacing laugh was barely audible but definitely there, and then a low gargling sound that sounded like it was from a distance. We started inching back to avoid Liam's creeping advance, and even though we couldn't see anything, I'm sure I could feel his breath on my face. "What are you two playing at? Let's head upstairs quickly," Liam shouted from about 15 feet away. I turned to the doorway and saw him standing there, looking like his perfectly normal, annoying bastard self. We sprinted to the door, but not before Liam bolted up the stairs to the 4th floor, laughing like a lunatic. Brian and I stopped in the hallway to catch our breath. "What was that? What's he up to? With these stupid jokes?" I said to Brian, who was looking up the stairwell. "And hiding in the corner like a weirdo," I continued after a few breaths. "But, was it him in the corner, though?" Brian said, seeming unsure of himself. "Well, I seen him. Yes, it was him. And then when the lights went out, he must have run around to the door. He's trying to scare us again. It's just not happening, man." I felt pissed off at Liam's stupid games. There seemed to have been a bit of role reversal. Ryan now appeared terrified, whereas I felt like I had to suck it up, take the lead here and put a stop to this. I felt proud of myself for not being scared. But then, Brian had to ruin it. How would he know that the torches would stop working? 2 torches at the exact same time. And how could he know we'd find him in there? That room was insanely dark. The time it took him to somehow get past us in pitch blackness and get to the door, then run upstairs, was like 3 seconds. He's done that without a sound, when you can't even see your hand in front of your face. Brian's voice began trembling. I started to question myself. I could feel the fear building in me once more. I turned to the room. The clicking had stopped, but there were scraping sounds now and again. I turned back to Brian. "So, you think that wasn't Liam in there?" My voice trembled. He looked up the stairs. Either that or that wasn't Liam who ran up the stairs. Brian looked back at me, looking at me dead in the eyes. "We both saw him. It was him." I felt like I was pleading for an answer, for some sanity. "You saw him in there too. What did you see? Was it definitely him? It could have been the shadows or something else. Brian took a few steps toward the door, stopping just in front. Liam! He gave a quick shout. It was him. It was definitely him, but he looked weird. I couldn't make out the full face perfectly, but I know it was him. I was beginning to struggle with my senses. But then we both saw him at the door, and it was definitely him being himself, being a dick. I don't know anymore. Maybe my brain was tricking me. I had to sit on the floor for a second and collect my thoughts. So we can both basically confirm that we're sure Liam ran up the stairs. Then I think we should go up there and get him, and then just get out of here. And with that, Brian turned and headed for the stairs. Let me get up 2 seconds. I got myself to my feet and met him at the bottom of the stairs. They went up and left and then up again. We could see up to the next landing. It looked the same as that room. Here, get the candles, Brian said. We pulled 2 candles and a lighter from the backpack and lit them. They didn't do much, but it was something. Rock, paper, scissors for who goes first. Best of 3, I suggested. Oh no, we don't have time to fuck around. I'll just go first. Well, thankfully Brian's brave streak had returned. We crept up the stairs, listening for any sounds. Apart from rubble and junk crunching under our feet, the whole place was relatively quiet. The air felt thicker up here as we approached the last few steps. A dagger-like chill pierced my skin. It was unnaturally cold. Liam, come out. We're going home, Brian called from the top step, holding the candle out in front of him. I joined him at the top and held my candle out in an attempt to light the area up a bit. Hey, come and look at this. Liam's voice echoed from the other end of the hall. No, we just want to go. Just come out. We're not leaving you, Brian replied. Just quickly. You need to see this, and then we can go, Liam called over again. And Brian and I looked at each other, and I shook my head. No, Liam, no, just hurry up, man. We want to go, Brian shouted. Well, I don't want to go home. Liam's voice sounded closer now. I didn't see anything, but I heard the sharp exhale. Something blew both of our candles out. At the same time, an ear-shattering clatter of metal from way below rung out, like someone emptying a bag of spanners onto the road. We were both absolutely dumbfounded. What the fucking hell was that? Brian was visibly trembling in his boots. And then it hit me like a ton of bricks. The ladder, I said as we both began to scramble back down the stairs. My worst fear was confirmed when we reached the steps leading down to the first floor. The ladder had literally been thrown across to the other side of the landing. The Halloween clown decoration was standing in its place. Its eyes lit up, and its mechanical arms and head began to move. Welcome to hell, children, the clown screeched. Part 3. A scream from above us came only too soon after being hit with the horrifying realization we were now trapped with someone or something sinister, stalking us, possibly looking to harm us in some way. I didn't even want to think about it. That sounded like Liam, Brian said before darting back up the stairs. Brian, wait, slow down. I tried to run up the stairs, but my legs were weak. I got to the 3rd floor only to catch a glimpse of Brian already running up the next set. Brian, slow down, man. Don't leave me, I called out, but he never stopped. I made my way to the next set of stairs to the 4th floor, and, with legs of jelly, began to haul myself up. Brian, wait, I called again, as I saw him reach the last step. He finally stopped and turned to me. Brian put a finger to his mouth. Shh. I slowed down, trying desperately to control my heavy breathing. I crept up the last few steps. Liam was sitting in the middle of the landing behind a single candle, the dim orange glow dancing on his face as he stared right back at us with a look of panic in his eyes. Brian put one foot on the landing. Liam started shaking his head, eyes growing wider, apparently warning us not to go any further. The candlelight extinguished and Liam screamed. We could hear him being dragged away at a rapid speed, crying. Then silence. Silence and darkness. I felt like I was about to cry. I wanted to go home and be with my mum and dad. I wish I'd never agreed to come here. Before I knew it, I was quietly sobbing and fell to my knees, with Brian sitting next to me. We need to do something, Danny. We can't go back down. Also, we can't leave him. Brian put his arm around me. I fell against him. What if something happens to us? I want to go home, Brian. I don't want to be here anymore. Images of my family raced through my mind, upsetting me even more. I know, so do I. He tried his best to console me. Do you not think Liam wants to go home too? He's up there himself. God knows what's happening to him. I can't even make sense of what's going on here. All I know is we can't leave him. I dried my eyes. Yeah, okay. I sniffed. I almost felt stupid crying in front of my friends. We need to light these candles again. I have the hammer and this screwdriver. Maybe we should let's eat these sandwiches and have a drink, or... Danny, calm down, Brian interrupted. We're not eating any sandwiches. We need to go now, get the candles, lighter, and the hammer, and ditch the bag for now. I hastily grabbed the 2 candles and lit them. Wielding the rusty claw hammer, Brian led the way. We stepped onto the 4th floor, holding the candles out in front, constantly checking side to side. The darkness was deep and surrounded us on all sides. Pieces of glass and rocks crunched under our feet as we crept towards the far end. We reached the wall and eventually followed it round to find a door. Brian pushed it open, with candle in hand, hammer raised in the other. It seems quiet. Come on in, Brian whispered. I followed close behind, checking behind me before we were fully inside. This room was a large square. It had an unbroken window on the far end, not boarded up, and a small glint of moonlight granted us some solace from the unrelenting pitch black we'd just come from. I felt more at ease seeing the world from the window, seeing the outside. I felt sad. I wished I could just climb out and be done with this place. Brian was milling around, scouring the room. The light partially illuminated the center of it, and to a lesser extent the walls, but it was still dark. There were old cupboards and cabinets. Brian was opening them, checking inside in case Liam was hiding, but there was nothing. I felt safe in here. There was nothing scary about this room. I didn't want to leave the window, but Brian told me to get the bag and leave it in here. Well, we'll use this room as a kind of base. If anything happens, always try and make it back here to regroup, no matter what, he said as he opened another cabinet. The door came off in his hand. Brian threw it to the ground and wandered up to the window. Hey, you going to get the bag then? He passed me the hammer. I reluctantly took it and went back outside. Everything about that room was completely different than it was everywhere else. As soon as I stepped out, I felt stalked, like I was being preyed on or attacked. I ran quickly to grab the bag sitting at the top of the stairs. I put my hand on the strap. And from the darkness, the hand grabbed me. Jagged black fingers clasped my arm and tightened all the way round. I looked up and saw Brian's face, smiling with glazed yellow eyes. He put his finger to his mouth. Shh. I felt my arm being pulled and I screamed bloody murder. I dropped the candle and tried swinging the hammer, but to no avail. I screamed and cried like I never had before. I heard a door open behind me. A soft candle glow fast approached, and suddenly I was being dragged back into the base room. What happened? What was going on? What happened? Brian stuttered in a panic. I couldn't control myself. I was crying like a baby. Danny, it's okay, man. I've got you. Brian trailed off. Whoa, what the fuck? He said as he lifted my arm. There were long, slender, uniformed burns where the hand had grabbed me. Oh, it stings. It burns. I was finally able to get some words out, and my arm was on fire. I dropped the candle. I think we only have one left. Brian looked at his candle, which had already burned down about halfway. Well, you got the bag at least. What else is in here? Brian rummaged inside, pulling out paper, and eventually found my sister's Polaroid camera. As a last resort, we can use the camera flash if we're stuck. The only other thing we can do is crunch this paper into sort of sticks and burn them if we need to. Okay, I nodded, still sniffing. We started crunching up the paper into baton-like shapes and twisted them to make them rigid. It'll probably only burn for like 20 seconds. That might be all we need. Brian tried his best to reassure me as he continued to make paper batons for burning. We had about 11 or 12 and stuck them in the bag along with the camera. I kept the screwdriver out in case we had to use that as some sort of weapon too. With the lighter handy in my pockets, we rested for a few minutes to try and think of a plan. Hey, do you think we need to go up any more stairs? I asked. Brian got to his feet as he began talking. No idea. We should just go out, follow the wall, and see where it leads. If it goes up, then we go up. If there's another door, we should check inside before going anywhere else. I mean, we need to find Liam. I took one last look out of the window, wondering if I'd ever see the outside again. And I turned to Brian. Hey, let's go for it then, I said, putting my bravest face on. Brian lit the last candle and picked up the hammer. Well, the door opened itself as we approached. Whatever was on the other side wanted us to come out. I wielded the flat-headed screwdriver, ready to stick anything that came for us. My focus was on getting out alive. I couldn't be scared anymore. Brian slowly crossed into the black landing. I had one hand on his jacket and the other holding my weapon in front of my face. When we'd both left the base room, I was on high alert, scanning it all around, just waiting for something to come for us. We walked slow, kept our backs to the wall, and sidestepped the perimeter of the hallway, looking for stairs or doors. I felt on edge with every step. The darkness was scrutinizing my movements. Something was there, something dark and hostile. I heard a thud on wood. It's another door, Brian whispered. We barged onto it, but it wouldn't budge. I saw stairs leading up right next to the door. Hey, shall we, go up? I asked. No, we need to burst this door open. Liam could be right in here. What sounded like a sledgehammer smashing the door from the other side startled us both. It was almost coming off the hinges, accompanied by a horrible gargling growl that sounded almost like a lion stalking its prey, only much more guttural. Yeah, maybe just head up the stairs, eh? Brian said, already turning on his heels to run up. I followed close behind. As we neared the top, the banging on the door below abruptly stopped. A rush of air breezed past us. The small stairwell to the bells was in front of us. The bells were within 4 arched walls. The moon lit the way leading up, and we could see what appeared to be shadows moving around back and forth near the top of the stairs. There were flies and bugs everywhere, and some noisy crows hanging around the arches. 2 doors on this level either side of the stairs seemed to beckon us inside. Faint noises from behind each had us struggling to decide where to go. What do we do? I asked Brian. My voice was shaking to match the rest of my body. I don't know. We just check these rooms, I suppose. There's nothing else we can do. Ryan raised the hammer and approached the door on the left. The other door on the right creaked open. "Hey, Danny," the cold whisper I'd heard before. "In here." I stopped dead in my tracks. Brian's eyes widened as he noticed something peeking out from the creaked opening in the doorway. I began walking over. Brian grabbed my arm, right on the burns. "Oh, for fuck's sake, Brian!" I pulled my arm back, blowing on it. "I'm sorry. Don't go in there. Just don't." He stared right into my eyes. He was as serious as I'd ever seen him. With just a nod of confirmation, we continued to slowly walk toward the door on the left again. The right door slammed shut in anger. Brian opened the left door, and the candle went out and we were plunged into darkness once again. Brian swung the hammer up and down and side to side, hitting only the air around him. I crouched down, readying my screwdriver for, well, I didn't know what for, but I was ready anyway. Brian lit the almost finished candle again. I pulled out some of the makeshift paper candles we'd made. We lit a couple. The flame was bigger and granted us more light. As we entered the room, the most foul stench I've ever had the misfortune of experiencing hit me. The room was cold and covered in black stuff, some rotting black sludge, weird figures and trinkets that seemed to be made from some sort of animal parts, and the flies in this room were relentless. The fire from my paper torch managed to light more of the room, and we could see Liam lying in a pile of rags and dead birds. There was a crude circle around him of black and red crystal-like stuff. I immediately darted over to him and grabbed his shoulders. Brian patted his face to wake him up. He was limp, but he was breathing. His eyes eventually opened. In the very limited light I could see his eyes were bloodshot, his face was covered in cuts, like slashes, and his clothes were torn up. "Liam, get up. We're getting out of here. Come on," Brian said. His voice was urgent and demanding. We threw an arm each over our shoulders and began carrying him out towards the stairs. Brian still had the hammer, and I held out some paper torches to light our way. We were finally getting out of here. Liam walked as much as he could, helping us as we were struggling. I looked up to the bells as we passed, looking at the moonlight. Oh, I couldn't wait to get out of here. "Danny! Brian!" A shout from the top of the stairs. I looked up. Liam was lying at the top of the stairs. "That's not me! Run!" he cried. He was dragged away from our sight just as the bells began to toll midnight. Part 4. The clanging bells shattered my eardrums. It actually hurt my ears waiting for them to stop. Liam felt like a dead weight on our shoulders. I can't say if he was conscious or not, but he was slumped. Brian looked at me. "What do we do?" I shook my head. "We can't go up there, Brian," I whispered. "But what if that's really him? What if, you know?" He darted his eyes towards Liam and tilted his head as he spoke. I looked at him. I looked at Liam. Brian hushed his voice to a quiet whisper. "This might not be Liam." "Brian, we're not carrying him up those stairs. How can we trust whoever that was at the top?" I seriously didn't want to go, but part of me already knew we were probably going up there. "Danny, we can't just ignore the fact that Liam could be up there right now. Look, it's only about 12 steps. We can go and peek, and if there's nobody there, we bolt." I felt like a piece of shit for even considering just dropping Liam and running for my life. I didn't care if I broke my ankles dropping off that first landing. I'd gladly drag myself out that front door just to feel the fresh air on my face again. But I just couldn't. I'd be abandoning my two best friends. They wouldn't abandon me. Alright, we go up and stay on the stairs. We look around for a maximum of 10 seconds and then we're off. I mean it, Brian. Brian nodded and began walking. We struggled a little getting Liam up the stairs. Slowly but surely, we made it to the last step. I thought I'd feel the outside breeze from the arches. It never came. It felt like the same stagnant, rancid air that filled everywhere else in this place. I started counting. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Danny! Brian! Liam's voice from behind us called out. Why the fuck have you brought that thing up here? He continued, seeing himself slumped over our shoulders. We turned to see Liam lying on the floor near one of the walls. He was also cut to ribbons and bruised badly. How do we know it's you? I barked at him. Because that thing you're carrying is not me. That's not me. Oh, fuck. Liam cried as he was lifted off the ground by an unseen force and thrown onto the edge of one of the arches. His legs were dangling off the side, facing probably a 60-foot drop. He cried out and pleaded with us to believe him. I don't want to die. Please, one of you help me. Please, I want to go home. Tears streamed down his face. I felt helpless. Hold on to him, Brian, I said as I pulled my head out from under Liam's arm. Brian dropped almost to the floor, trying to hold him up. I began to take a few steps towards the arch. I could hear the other Liam's feet scraping the wall outside, trying to get Purchase to pull himself up. Please, Danny, don't let me fall, man, please. Don't do it, Danny. It's a trick. Liam's voice again came from behind me this time, struggling to get his words out. Brian still had his arm over his shoulder. His head was bowed and he was on his knees. I don't know what the fuck I'm supposed to do here, Liam. Which one's the real you? God, I can't take this. I felt defeated already. My head was spinning with confusion. I was having an emotional meltdown. It's me, they both said at exactly the same time. God, I couldn't think straight. Liam's arm slipped down a little from the arch. Danny, quick, it's me. Help me, please. I had to think on my feet. Right, where did we... No, I know. Whose ladder did we take up to the second floor? Liam, slipping further to the edge, almost hanging by his fingertips, cried out as loud as I'd ever heard him. My dad! It was my dad's ladder! At the same time behind me, I heard a laboured breath and Liam's voice say, It's my uncle's ladder. Brian dropped him in an instant and took 2 steps back. His eyes were wide in fear as he watched Liam roll onto his back, taking deep breaths. It's my uncle's ladder, he muttered, just under his breath again. Like a bullet, I darted to the edge of the arched opening and grabbed Liam's arm. Oh, fuck, I'm so sorry, Liam. I'm so sorry. It's okay. Just pull me up, he said. Quick. He looked delighted that I'd figured it out. I tried my best to pull him up by myself, but he was bigger than me, and I was half expecting to be pushed over by something at any second. I pulled and pulled. Brian grabbed my legs and began to pull, and I looked back and saw Liam still lying on the ground behind us. Oh, come on, Brian. Pull. We need to pull harder, I screamed. I felt Brian pulling hard on my legs, but I could also... Wait. Could I feel my arm being pulled? Was Liam pulling me out? I looked back down. Liam's face had a wide grin and his eyes had turned bright yellow. Long, black, jagged fingers snaked up my arm like vines and gripped onto me. He was now completely dangling off my arm. I screamed. I screamed so fucking loud at Brian. It's not him. It's not him. Brian, help me. Brian got up and came to the edge to see what I could see, and he almost fell back in horror. Do something, Brian, I shouted. Brian ran back and fetched the hammer. Within a few seconds, he was leaning over, smashing this thing's arm and head, trying with everything he could to loosen its grip. I was able to gain some more ground, sliding back on my stomach, pulling it up slightly. Brian was getting some good headshots, but it barely even reacted. 2 seconds, Brian said, and hurried over to the bag. I felt myself slipping closer to the edge again. Hurry the fuck up, Brian, I yelled. Brian came back with about 6 paper batons twisted together and set them alight. The large flame illuminated the distorted, bashed face that mimicked our friend. The glow waltzed in its wide, maniacal eyes before Brian smashed the fire right into its face. A deafening scream filled the air as I felt my arm loosen up. The bells began to ring, louder this time, and Brian started stabbing at it with a screwdriver. The fingers slowly began to release my arm, and eventually I was able to let go. I could still see the crooked face grinning and distorting as it fell, and it made no sound. The bell stopped abruptly as a loud thud on the ground confirmed that, whatever this was, had just smashed into the ground. My arm throbbed and blisters began forming almost immediately. I rolled onto my back, out of breath. "Fucking hell," Brian exclaimed. "I feel sick. God, my heart's pounding." "I'm not feeling so great myself, mate," I replied, shooting him a faint smile, feeling safe enough now to be sarcastic. I just lay there, finally feeling the breeze caress my cheeks. Oh, it felt incredible, cool and fresh. I heard Brian stirring, trying to get to his feet as we both heard Liam groaning behind us where he was still lying on the floor. Brian shuffled over and crouched next to him. He patted Liam's face. "Hey, wake up, Liam. It's over," he said. Liam groaned once more and moved his head. "The ladder was my uncle's. My dad didn't have one," he said. "You fucking idiots," he coughed as he attempted to laugh. I was glad to hear he hadn't lost his shitty sense of humor, even if it did annoy me. Brian smiled. "Well, maybe you could have mentioned that, you fucking moron," he said with a nervous laugh. "Hey, come on, man. Let's get the fuck out of here. We need someone tall to drop down the stairs and set up the ladder. I hope you're up for that," he laughed. We began getting Liam to sit up and eventually both helped him to his feet. "God, I'm sorry about all this, guys." He sounded genuinely remorseful. "I got carried away with trying to play stupid pranks. I should never have gone off alone. Look, it's fine, man." I felt like I should reassure him now that all was well. Then I can get mad later when he's better. "Right, we've made it. We just need to get out of here, then we can never look back. We all made it, together." I continued looking at both Brian and Liam. Heading down the stairs to the 5th floor, everything seemed different. The air had cleared. It still smelled like shit, but there was no feeling of any presence. It wasn't as thick as before. We could actually see in the dark now. I felt my mind and body relax as we walked with ease down to the 4th floor. Liam was regaining some strength as he drank some juice, and the relief of seeing him get visibly better before our eyes was indescribable. "Well, I think we should, leave our exploration adventures for a while, eh?" Liam chuckled to himself. "Yeah, maybe schedule the next one for about 30 years, I jested. Brian and Liam both laughed. We began walking down to the 3rd floor. Liam wanted to try the stairs himself, but we were taking our time to let him try and get himself back on his own feet. Liam went first, and we walked slowly behind him, ready to grab him should he stumble or fall. I felt my eyes welling up as we got lower and lower in the tower. Every step down felt like a new victory. We'd reached the 3rd floor. Liam burst out laughing. He must have been happy he'd done it himself. "Oh, you fucking weirdos. Why did you bring that thing up?" He laughed some more. Brian and I looked at each other confused. My eyes squinted as I struggled to see into the middle of the landing. That Halloween clown decoration was standing there, looking right at us. I heard the mechanics start to move. "Step right up, children, and get your tickets to hell," the clown shrieked, followed by a frenzied laugh. And it moved, in a different way than before. It appeared to shake and lift off the ground. Before anyone could react, the clown was picked up and launched into the darkness. A figure slowly came forward. "Ah, fucking clown," I heard a voice say from the darkness. A voice I recognized only too well. My body went tense. A chill crept up my spine. Brian emerged from the darkness, battered and covered in cuts and slashes just like Liam was. "Oi, what the fuck?" he exclaimed. "Guys, get away from that thing. That's not me. We need to get the fuck out of here now," he commanded. "Oh, there's no way in hell I'm falling for that one again," I thought, just as Liam was shoved to the ground in an instant. Less than a second later, I felt burning fingers begin to slither around my neck from behind. Part 5. The burning black fingers had almost completely wrapped around my neck when Brian grabbed my jacket and pulled me. I jerked forward and could feel my skin peeling off as the snake-like grip released. I fell down. Brian dragged me backwards to where Liam had already crawled to. "What the fuck is that thing?" Brian stammered. I'd never heard so much fear in anyone's voice before. I shook my head, and we moved further back as the thing in front of us twisted and distorted itself. I don't know, Brian. We need to get to the stairs," I said. My voice was shaking so hard I struggled to speak. The whole area turned darker and darker by the second as we watched the deformed figure sculpting itself, bending and snapping into unimaginably twisted forms. The darkness took over. Thick black surrounded every one of us. I could barely hear my friends over the loud cackling of this beast that stood before us under the cover of darkness. I was trembling. I couldn't move. I felt Liam's hand patting my leg, finding me and eventually grabbing me up to my feet. The windows and doors of the rooms either side shattered and burst open. A hurricane-like wind almost blew us off our feet. Glass and debris was flying all around us, smacking and cutting our faces. We huddled together, terrified and helpless. I huddled my head down into Liam's chest, shielding my face and attempting to cover my ears from the deafening sound. Well, I cried. I'm not ashamed. I began crying my freaking eyes out. I genuinely thought we were all dead in that moment. And then, just as quick as it all began, everything stopped in an instant. We were still huddled together, and it was a good few minutes before anyone was brave enough to look up. The darkness still filled the room, but there was a calm. I plucked up the courage to finally look. In the direction of the stairs where we'd come from, I could see two eyes piercing the night. They followed our every move as we inched away. We had no light, but we knew the general direction of where we had to go. A horrible, slow, demonic laugh emanated from the deep chasm before us. The eyes never blinked. They never looked anywhere else. They just watched us. I remembered the Polaroid camera was still in the bag. I hurriedly tried to unzip it with my shaking hands. It was the only possible light source we had left. The scraping and crunching of soft, dragging footsteps began to approach us slowly. I lifted the camera up and clicked. A bright flash illuminated the entire room for a split second. We saw the stairs leading up and down. We saw what direction we had to go. We also saw a tall, black mass with elongated limbs and pointed features stalking us. We began moving toward the direction of the stairs. A rush of bitter cold, sulfuric wind slapped our cheeks and burned our noses. The smell was almost unbearable. I I felt something caress my shin and foot, along with a haunting little girl's giggle. "I'm out the stairs," Brian yelped as he almost fell down. I flashed the camera again. The photo bumped my knee as it fell to the ground and made me flinch. The flash revealed it was in the farthest away corner now, still staring at us intently, but seemed further away as we stepped down one at a time. I flashed the camera down the stairs. Everything seemed clear. The photo gently clapped onto the step. We continued our descent, holding on to each other for dear life until we reached the second landing. I again snapped the camera into the darkness. A line of small, hunched-over shadow figures stood all around, just watching. Then I snapped back up the stairs. The huge demonic beast-like figure was crawling down the steps behind us on all fours. So quiet we never heard a thing. I could see eyes trained on us from everywhere when the flash disappeared. I had visions of us getting to the part of the stairs that had crumbled away and all of us being thrown off. I had visions of us being captured here forever and slaughtered in the most horrific ways. I snapped another photograph. The flash lit the way to the last set of stairs. We held onto each other and bolted for it. I felt things grab at my face and legs, pulling my jacket, and by the sound of Brian and Liam screaming, I imagined they were feeling the same. We darted down the first few steps as I clicked the camera once more. The flash came out just in time for us to stop. Well, the first floor seemed further down than before. Liam, without hesitation, began crouching down, ready to dangle himself off the crumpled stairway and drop down. We just had to hope he wouldn't injure himself. I flashed the camera back upstairs. We could see a crowd of black shadows beginning to form at the top. My heart was racing, and I felt faint. The photo fell again to the ground and grazed my leg. I almost fell backwards. The sound of a grunt, with broken glass and stones being disturbed from below, confirmed to us that Liam had made the drop. "You okay?" Brian shouted. "I'm fine. Where's this fucking ladder?" Liam screamed back, sounding panicked. I hit the camera again. The ladder was in the far corner. There were rocks and wood lying all over the place. "Keep going, Danny. I don't want to hurt myself here," Liam instructed. He sounded a little more optimistic that we might be able to make it now. I snapped as quickly as I could, and after every 2 or 3, I turned the camera upstairs. The crowd of figures were getting larger every time. Some of them began taking a step or 2 down. "Liam, we need to be quick, man," I screamed. Brian was shaking like a leaf. I kept clicking the camera. The photos were falling like autumn leaves all around us. Liam made it to the ladder and picked it up. I kept that flash going as much as possible until he was able to get back and set it up right underneath us. Brian went first. I used the flash to guide him as best I could. He made it, no problem. As he climbed down, I flashed the camera back up the stairs. The shadow figures were closing in, only about 4 steps away. I had to move fast. I crouched and got down onto my stomach. I began to throw my legs over the edge. Icy, cold, putrid breath met my face as I carefully lowered myself to the ladder. Sheer terror and adrenaline consumed me as I tried so hard not to fall. Every part of my body was shaking violently as I felt something slowly creep up my hand and onto my wrist. I screamed. I screamed as I tried to lower myself faster. I was terrified of falling, and I was terrified of lingering too long. I felt my foot just touch the top step, and then I was able to lower myself to the second step down, holding the crumpled stair by nothing more than my fingertips. As I heard something laughing from above me, I felt the stairs begin to crumble and crack more. The time was now. I had to just go for it, all or nothing. I let go and quickly got my foot onto the 3rd step, immediately dropping myself to grab hold of the top rung. The ladder shook violently and began to topple, and I screamed for help. Brian and Liam attempted to steady it, but I could feel it falling. I quickly got down another few steps before the ladder clattered onto the ground, taking me with it. Well, luckily, I was around the halfway point and I didn't fall too far. I'd hurt my arm and leg on one side, but mostly felt okay to continue. I flashed the camera up one last time to see multiple arms dangling down, grabbing indiscriminately at us. "Run, just fucking run," Liam said, turning immediately. We dashed for the last set of stairs, leaving the ladder where it had fallen, almost tripping over each other as we scrambled to make it down to the ground level. The front door lay open, spilling a small amount of moonlight inside the building. As we approached the bottom of the stairs, the door slammed shut with such force it appeared to crack the wood. A monstrous roar followed us down the stairs. There was only one thing for it. We all ran together to start kicking and bashing at the door. We were all now screaming and crying while frantically kicking and shoulder barging the door. The sounds got closer and closer until eventually everything stopped. Everything fell quiet and calm. The door slowly creaked open and we all took a step back. We all looked at one another. Then Brian just said, "Bolt." And with that, we ran as fast as we could to the perimeter fence. Liam boosted me over first, then Brian, and he was able to scale the fence himself with such ease he was on his bike before any of us. We cycled like madmen through the forest trails, guided by the scarce moonlight piercing through the trees. I can't even describe the relief I felt when we made it to the road. The cool, fresh night air filled my lungs. I felt like I'd been reborn. And I smiled. I actually smiled. We cycled all the way back to Liam's and snuck into his garage, where we stayed until the sun came up. Well, we struggled to calm ourselves down after what had just happened, and mostly sat in complete silence, full of adrenaline but too afraid to move or make any sound. The sky was getting lighter by the minute. Liam stood up and checked if we were awake. "I'm going to bed, guys. I need to try and sleep. Just stay here as long as you want," he said as he turned and went inside. I looked at Brian, who was lying on the floor with wide, bloodshot eyes. "Right, I might try and head home too, man," I said to him. Brian nodded. "What are you going to do?" "Dunno. I think I'll leave soon. Just trying to get my head sorted out," he replied. "I'll be okay. You get yourself home, Danny." I nodded at Brian. "Yeah, no worries. I'll catch you later, mate," I said as I walked to the side door. As I cycled through the streets, the sun felt amazing on my face. Seeing people going about their business, driving cars, walking around, dogs barking, birds singing, everything felt normal again. As I approached my house, I could see my parents in the window, and I had never felt so happy to see them. I went inside, hiding my arms and neck as much as possible, in case the burns were visible. "Hi, son. How was your night? Want some toast?" my dad said. "I'm okay, Dad. We stayed up all night playing the computer. God, I really need some sleep," I replied. He rolled his eyes and shook his head. "No problem. Yeah, get some rest." I climbed the stairs, legs struggling like hell, but it couldn't have been more worth it when I fell onto my mattress. My room was nice and cool, and my bed felt like a cloud. And I sparked out almost immediately. I slept right through until dusk. When I woke up, my mum had left me some pizza lying on my bedside table. I sat up, put the TV on, picked a slice up and started flicking through the channels. My stomach was grateful for the food. Something scraped my thigh, kind of like a tickle from something sharp. I got a fright but remembered where I was. And eventually, I pulled the duvet off me. Immediately everything flashed into my mind as I sat there. Everything rushed back to me in a split second, and I dropped my pizza. My mind raced, as did my heart. on the bed, all around me. Polaroids. Lots of Polaroids. I picked them up and began nervously flicking through. The first was a photo from the crumbled stairs showing Liam under us and the ladder in the far corner. As I hesitantly flicked through one by one, Liam got closer, as something began to appear in the corner. A long, black, shadowy mass, tall and thin, stood just beyond the ladder. Liam picks up the ladder and, like a stop-motion picture, slowly jerks his way towards us on the stairs. The shadow figure follows very close behind. Liam sets the ladder up, and the shadow's now directly in front of him. He's completely oblivious, as we all are. As Brian begins crawling down the ladder, meanwhile the shadow figure has long fingers wrapped around Liam's neck. Brian reaches the bottom, and the shadow figure is gone. The last photograph was just before I climbed down myself. Brian's looking up, waving me down with his hand in the air. Liam's finger is outstretched, beckoning me with a jagged black hand as he smiles right into the camera with glowing yellow eyes. The eyes seem to follow me. I jumped back in my bed and threw the photograph to the ground. My bedroom door handle began to turn slowly, and the door cracked open. I pulled the cover up and hid my face. "Danny," a soft voice quietly called. It was my mom. I pulled the covers back down from my face and looked at her. "Sorry, son. Thought you might be still sleeping. Are you okay?" she continued, entering my room. "I'm fine. Just tired," I replied. "Okay, well, when you get up, you can tidy this room up," she moaned. I rolled my eyes. "Oh, your friend Brian's on the phone. He said you've left some stuff at his house," she mumbled, looking around my room as she was handing me the receiver. "Thanks," I said, showing her out of my room with my hand. I put the phone to my ear. What's up, Brian?" "Danny." Brian's voice sounded horrendous. He sounded like someone was holding a gun to his head. "Danny." He trailed off. "What's going on, Brian?" I said sternly. I could swear I could hear him sobbing down the line. "Liam's missing," Brian stammered. His voice was weak and shaking. I looked at the photo I'd just thrown on the floor. His eyes were still trained on me from the bell tower, his fingers slowly curling in, summoning me. "Danny, did you hear me?" Brian asked, sounding agitated. "Yeah, I think I know where he is," I replied. There's an old bell tower near my house. It's strictly forbidden to enter. I wish we had never found out why. By Reggae Junkie Gee. Part 1. Brian spoke as I caught myself off guard thinking about Liam. He lay on the grass holding an air rifle I got a couple of months ago for my 19th birthday. Aiming down the sight at two magpies pecking at the soil for food, he spoke to himself. "One for sorrow, one for joy," he said, swaying the rifle between the two birds. "One for sorrow, two for..." He hesitated a moment. "Joy," he finished as he pulled the trigger. In a second, the magpie was on its side, one wing flapping wildly while the other never moved at all. The other bird, startled, flew away to safety. The poor thing struggled and tried to run or fly away, but it was too late. The damage was done. "Ah, fucking boom! Did you see that shot?" Brian said as he pumped his fist in the air. He was a bit too excited. I looked on and ever so slightly nodded. I was nowhere near as excited to see a bird struggling for its life as he was. This wasn't exactly what I had in mind for the air rifle. Brian began running over to the dying animal. "Oh, come on, Danny, let's go see," he barked as he lit up a cigarette. I took my time following Brian over. He picked up the bird and snapped its neck. I recoiled in shock. Brian, for fuck's sake, man. I'm putting it out of its misery, he snapped back. Still, it's horrible. You're banned from using the gun from now on, I said, picking it up off the ground. Alright, okay, whatever, he laughed. Here, what are we doing today anyway? Should get some cans and go to the pond. We sometimes got some cans of beer and sat by a pond situated within a country park. Not many people went down that way, but there were a few benches and it was a nice spot to get drunk and hang out. Sure, we could go to pubs and drink like normal people, but we like the calm. We're a little bit more withdrawn than most people. Whatever, I'm not bothered. Nothing else to do anyway, I replied, looking into the distance. I could see someone walking towards us, but couldn't quite make them out. It was a large field with any number of directions to walk, but they were coming straight for us. Yeah, who's that? I asked Brian, squinting my eyes in the sunlight. Brian turned with the dead magpie still in his hand. No idea. Looks like it could be Sean, he shrugged, sounding like he didn't care. Okay, so why the fuck is he walking all the way over to us? I asked, already suspecting the answer. Because I told him we'd be here with the air rifle. Hey, calm down, Danny. Sean's alright. Brian began walking towards him then. Seconds later, I heard Sean's annoying as fuck voice. Sean and I never really got along. He's owed me 30 quid for about 3 years for a start, but apart from that, he's just annoying, smarmy, always act like he knows everything and lies about everything to one-up anything you've done. We always used to say, if you've been to Tenerife, he's been to 11 Reef. Well, Brian loved him though, probably because they drank a lot together. And while I did drink now and then, it was never as much as those two. He also smoked weed occasionally, whereas I never smoked. Brian, how are you, brother? Sean said, holding his arms out for a hug. I'm brilliant, Sean, Brian replied as he reciprocated. I rolled my eyes at the over-exaggerated greetings. Danny. Sean came over to meet me. Still a mummy's boy? He laughed and acted smug, patting my face with his hand, thinking he was hilarious. Good one, I said, looking at the air rifle, imagining myself just firing it into his face. In the past 5 years, Brian had become a bit of a wild card. He started drinking not long after Liam went missing. I had some rough times too, but I dealt with it in different ways. Brian seems to go off the rails a bit. He fell in with a crowd of guys we were in school with, but never really knew at the time. Ashwin, an Indian kid whose mum died when he was young and his dad was extremely strict and also an alcoholic. Dennis, who'd been caught dealing drugs at school and spent time in a young offenders institute. Then there was Sean. His dad abused him, his mum and his brothers, before his older brother snapped and gave him brain damage by hitting him with a car. Well, the 3 most messed up kids in school somehow found each other and became best friends. Make of that what you will. I'm sure there's a psychology experiment in there somewhere. To be fair to Ash and Dennis, they were actually really nice guys once you got to know them. But Sean was always a total dick. I always thought if Liam was here, he would have done something about Sean, put him in his place somehow. I genuinely miss Liam. He could be an asshole sometimes, but he always kept us grounded and stuck up for us. We would probably never have even known these guys if he was here. Sean and Brian were chatting just ahead of me in hushed voices. Brian seemed to get agitated before he stormed away from Sean. He walked right past me. He was clearly pissed off about something. What have you said to him, Sean? Why is he storming away? I asked, demanding an answer immediately. And Sean took a step towards me with a wild expression on his face. Out of pure instinct, I raised the air rifle and took aim at his face. Stay back, man. I fucking swear I'll shoot you, I said in a commanding tone. Sean just laughed. Daddy, get a grip. I'm not going to do anything. I come in peace, he said sarcastically as he took another step toward me. Then why did Brian storm off? Why are you coming for me like a weirdo? I took a step back, still aiming the rifle. I'm not coming for you, I'm just coming over to you. Put the rifle down, you look stupid, he said. I did feel a bit stupid, to be honest. Sean continued. I was just telling Brian I went down to the old bell tower earlier. A few hairs pricked up on my arms. I said as I lowered the gun. My voice was weak. "And, Danny boy," he started with a smile, "I saw someone looking out from the top, and I can see without 90% certainty it's that older boy you used to hang around with. That one who went missing, William or whatever." "It's Liam, dickhead," I snapped back, jolting the rifle in his direction. "I know you didn't. People already check the bell tower when the search parties are out. If you know what's good for you, you'll stay away from there." Images of our time in the tower flashed in my mind, things I've spent years trying to forget. "Whatever. That's just a shitty old building," he declared as he partially turned around. "Anyway, I saw what I saw. You might be hiding out there or something. If you're all too scared of stupid ghost stories to get your friend back, then that's your problem." He turned back to me and threw his arms up. "Don't shoot the messenger," he said with a high-pitched, unreal sarcasm in his voice and a shit-eating smirk on his face. Sean began walking back the way he came. The urge to shoot him in the back of the head was unbearable. But it couldn't have been him. It couldn't have been Liam. The whole way home, I couldn't stop thinking about it. I didn't think Sean knew about our night in the bell tower, unless Brian told him. We agreed to never tell anyone, so him saying that really struck a nerve. It didn't make sense. Oh, Brian must have said something. After that night, Liam disappeared from his house not long after we'd left. The last I'd seen him was when he left the garage to go to bed. His dad had seen him acting strange in the garden, walking in circles and mumbling incoherently before he suddenly sprinted away. Well, Liam's dad gave chase but couldn't keep up with his younger, fitter son. After that, he was never seen again. He wasn't caught on any CCTV. No other witnesses came forward with sightings. It seemed that he simply just vanished off the face of the earth. His parents were of course devastated, and we searched for months. Well, as a matter of fact, we never truly stopped searching, even after search parties and police efforts were eventually cancelled. Right up until recently, Brian and myself would often sneak out at night to look for him, through the woods, the outskirts of town, or the abandoned houses, sometimes even going to the bell tower and calling his name from outside the fence. But nothing ever came of it. We were too scared to go back inside now. Liam's dad and two uncles had already searched the bell tower from top to bottom one morning not long after he went missing. Not because of anything we'd said, just because it was a place near town where someone could hide. They said there was nothing inside worth mentioning. As the years passed, the world turned, and new things piqued the public's interest. Other stories came and went. Liam's disappearance faded into the background of people's minds. But we never forgot. We'll never forget as long as we live, and we will never stop looking for him. Sean saying that today hit me hard. Couldn't decide if he was just being a prick or if he was sincere. If Brian told him about the bell tower, then maybe he's just trying and miserably failing to be funny. But on the other hand, if Brian hadn't told him, then what could possibly make him say that? Well, that thought gave me the chills. Too many questions in my head. I started feeling sick again and thinking about everything. I just wanted to get home and lie down. When I eventually got home, I went straight to my room, put some Pink Floyd on and laid on my bed. It was only mid-afternoon, but my brain was tired, playing over everything in my head, sorting my thoughts out. Well, it was mentally draining. It wasn't long before I drifted off and fell asleep. I had dreams about the bell tower. That clown thing was dancing in a window, laughing frantically as its arms stretched out to about 40 feet long to grab me and Brian and pull us up back inside. Liam was behind it, pulling strings and dancing too. I woke up sweating and breathing heavily. I wasn't sure if I was definitely awake or not. It was nighttime. The moonlight shone in through my window and glistened on my damp skin. Didn't even know what time it was, so I searched for my mobile phone. It wasn't on my bed, it wasn't on the floor, it wasn't on my bedside table. Oh, where the fuck is it? I questioned myself. What time is it? And then I knew. Suddenly I knew the time. In the distance, as clear as day, those old bells tolled midnight once again. My phone lit up from the other side of the room. Brian was calling me. Part 2. Danny, I need to tell you something. Brian sounded panicked, speaking frantically before the phone was even at my ear. Do you hear them? He said after a short pause. I listened, but I couldn't bring myself to speak. I was frozen. The bells clanged and chimed their songs so far away in the distance, but the sound reverberated around my head, made me feel faint, dizzy. Danny, are you there? It's the bells, I said at last, finally able to push words from my mouth. I hear them, Brian. I need to tell you something. Something Sean told me. I didn't believe him at first. That's why I stormed off. I thought he was just being a... I know, Brian, I interrupted. He told me too. Didn't want to believe it either, but that's where we always thought he ended up. You didn't tell Sean what happened to us in there, did you? I asked. Brian scoffed. Of course I didn't. I haven't told anyone. He sounded annoyed at me for questioning his loyalty. Okay, I didn't think you did. I just wanted to make sure. I dropped the phone silently from my ear. The bells had stopped. What do we do? Do we go back? I mean, if he is in there, then we really should go back and see if we can find him. I can't live with the guilt anymore, Brian. We know he was trapped in there. We never went back. Ryan hit back, sounding pissed off before I could say anything else. People searched the bell tower, Danny. Liam wasn't there. There's nothing for us to feel guilty about. He ran away. I stood at my bedroom window, pondering his words for a minute. I still felt guilty, even if he didn't. Sure, we were just kids, and sure, we'd have probably been killed if we went back that night. But at the end of the day, Liam was gone, and I really felt like that was our burden to carry. We're all supposed to make it out together, and one of us got left behind. Danny! I heard Brian from the other end of the line after a long silence. Brian, look, before you say anything else, I think we need to go back. What if somehow Liam's still in there? What if there's any possible way we can get him back? I mean, we're not kids anymore. If there's even the slightest chance we can get our friend back home, I think we should be taking it. I heard Brian breathing heavily as I spoke. Oh, Danny, that place fucked us up. Maybe not you since you're so desperate to go back, but that night's ruined my freaking life. Brian was sobbing and sniffing as he spoke. We owe it to him, Brian. We always said we'd stick together no matter what. We need to go back. I wasn't taking no for an answer. Oh, for fuck's sake. I suppose you're right, Danny. I don't know. He paused for a few moments and then continued. Meet us tomorrow at 12. If we're going, we're taking the guys with us, and we're going during the day. Meet us at the park near the abandoned houses. Right, no problem. I'll be there, I replied. And Brian hung up. I lay back down in bed. Images of that night littered my thoughts. I struggled to get back to sleep. I felt dazed and horrible the next morning, like I was hungover somehow. I got myself ready and sat thinking of what I should bring with me. I took a rucksack and put some things in. A few large kitchen knives, hammer, a big torch with extra batteries, and I took a lighter with a can of hairspray. Yeah, I remembered the paper on fire being a relatively effective tool. I felt like a makeshift flamethrower was somewhat upping our game. I met Brian, who was already with Sean and Ash, and they were sitting on a small grassy patch next to the road. We were just waiting on Dennis with the car. With all the pleasantries out of the way, we had to get down to it and tell everybody about the bell tower. Dennis arrived shortly after I did, and I let Brian take the lead on the story. I could see in everyone's faces that they thought we were full of shit. I sat there thinking to myself, well, you just wait till you're inside. Sean laughed. Therefore, Ash and Dennis copied him, but I really feel like they had to force their laughter. I think there was at least some doubt woven into their minds, which was a good thing. We were all going in, and we had to be prepared to expect the worst. We got out of the car and made the short trek through the woods. As I saw the looming bell tower come into view through the trees, I shuddered. Sean and Ash were messing around and laughing at something, but I couldn't focus. I was already on edge. My mind was already in that tower. As we approached the fence, Brian pulled out a pair of bolt cutters. Good thinking, I said, patting him on the back. Within a minute or so, we'd cut a long slit in the fence, more than enough to part the fence and easily climb through. And, just like that, we were back. Looking up to the arches like we did when we were kids, and had no idea what we were getting into. Oh, and I felt like I was 13 again. I felt scared, but I also felt determined. Determined to prove myself, determined to get my friend back and not let this place haunt my dreams anymore. Before I could say anything, Sean was putting his boot into the wooden door. It began to splinter and crack, and eventually burst open. As simple as that, he chuckled, and walked inside without hesitation. God, I felt like I could actually see the stale air rushing out from the tower as the sulfuric smell that was all too familiar to me met my nose and took me right back to 5 years ago. I looked at Brian. He didn't seem too sure about going in, so we let Dennis and Ash head in first. Not wanting to let anyone out of my sight, I quickly hurried in behind them, and Brian followed suit. Dennis cautiously shuffled along the floor that was strewn with rubble and wood. Dead birds and a mutilated fox lay heaped in a corner, attracting hundreds of flies. "Oh, it smells like freaking assholes in here," Ash piped up. "Oh, if that smell comes from your asshole, man, I'll go see a doctor ASAP," Sean fired back. They all laughed, all but myself and Brian, who just stood looking up the center of the stairs and landings that snaked the wall all the way up. Dennis was already climbing the first set of stairs. "Wait," Brian called to him. "We all go together. Nobody splits up." Dennis rolled his eyes. "Right, well, hurry up then. I want to get back home for dinner." I shook my head. These guys have no clue what could be waiting for us up those stairs. We all milled around, checking the rooms before heading in single file to the stairs. As it was around midday, it wasn't too dark, and light spilled in through the doorway, the few windows that weren't boarded up, and through cracks in the wood of those that were boarded up. Dennis was already halfway up, waiting, so we began to walk as we caught up to him. One thing I didn't even think about was bringing a ladder to reach the second floor. God, I could have kicked myself for being such an idiot. I would have if Liam's ladder wasn't already set up perfectly right at the stairs. Brian and I looked at each other, and then he stepped to go forward. I put my hand on his chest. "Hey, wait," I said. The ladder being there made me feel uneasy. "Why is that even there?" I asked. "Well, maybe Liam's dad set it up when they were looking for him," Brian suggested. What, and his dad, or better yet, his uncle, never thought to question why his ladder was here? I looked up and down. "Hey, what's the hold-up? Why are you two freaking out about a freaking ladder?" Sean spoke loud, shaking his head. "Well, we're just wondering why it's there. How it got there." Brian sounded annoyed, and I was annoyed too. "Who cares why it's there?" He turned and gestured to the ladder then. "It's there, so we should use it." Sean then turned back to us. "Well, maybe it's there because William has been using it to get up and down the stairs. You ever think of that?" "Hey, it's Liam, you fucking..." I attempted to chastise Sean, but he'd already turned and started climbing the ladder. I looked at Brian and shook my head. "God, we never should have brought him," I said as I walked away. Sean had reached the top of the ladder and started climbing onto the remaining portion of the stairs. Before he was even off the ladder, Dennis had begun climbing. I stood next to Ash. "Oh, God. What's the deal with this ladder, then? I'm confused," he asked in his soft voice. "It's just another part of the story," I told him. "It was Liam's uncle's ladder, but when they searched here, they said they found nothing noteworthy. And then we get here and it's set up nicely at the stairs, waiting on us. God, just gives me a bad feeling." I can see why, he said. He patted my back and nodded his head towards the ladder. On you go, Danny. I'll get Brian. Ash turned and went to fetch Brian, who looked upset and was standing stationary a few feet away. I stood at the bottom of the ladder, waiting for them to come over, and then, one by one, we climbed up onto the crumbling stairs. As we ascended the old stone, I could literally feel the air getting thicker. The smell of rotten damp fouled my nose. Sean and Dennis led the way. They were up front joking about stuff and laughing like little girls. Couldn't really hear what they were saying, though. Suddenly Sean blurted out, "William, are you up there? Come out, wherever you are." God, how difficult is it to remember one simple name? I was beginning to think he was calling Liam William on purpose, out of pure disrespect. "God, it's Liam," Ryan corrected him. "Ooh, sorry," Sean jested. Dennis sniggered at his sarcasm. "Liam," Sean called out again. "Where are you, Liam?" He was elongating his name, acting stupid, like it was funny. And as we approached the second floor landing, I could hear something. It sounded faded, as if it were in the distance. It was humming, like someone humming a tune. The tune was vaguely familiar. Nobody else seemed to notice. Everybody continued as if nothing was out of the ordinary. We made our way into the middle of the landing. I spent a few minutes looking at the door where I first heard the whisper that night 5 years ago. It was still shut. Dennis kicked the door opposite and it swung open. The smell of death rushed out to greet us as we slowly entered. Oh, I remembered this room. The same pile of dead birds lay in the corner. Now nothing more than a pile of bones and matted black feathers. A creaking sound from outside grabbed my attention. I turned, but again nobody seemed fazed. And the humming started again. God, what was that tune? I thought as I racked my brain. Everyone was talking over each other, and I struggled to get a word in. All the while the humming was getting noticeably louder. Hey, does nobody else hear that? Can everybody just shut up for a second and listen? They all stopped, but the humming continued. I could see eyes widening as we all quietly counted in our heads and confirmed to ourselves that all 5 of us were in the room, and there was music coming from somewhere. Hey, what is it? I've heard that before somewhere, Ryan said, keeping his voice low. The humming grew a little louder once more. We stood, absolutely frozen still, and we listened. The humming appeared to sound like it was echoing down a long corridor from another room, growing very gradually louder. Every one of us was dead silent, too frightened to move, and the humming continued. After about 10 or 20 seconds, it broke into a soft singing voice. "What do you see when you turn out the lights? I can't tell you, but I know it's mine," the voice sang. My jaw dropped almost to the floor as I turned to Brian. He was the same, his mouth hung open, his wide eyes beginning to well up. It's I began and shook my head. Brian nodded. "Oh, I get by with a little help from my friends. I get high with a little help from my friends. Gonna try with a little help from my friends." The voice, it felt almost forgotten yet so familiar it made my hair stand up and my gut wrench. "It's Liam," Brian whispered. That song he..." Brian never got to finish his sentence. The door slammed shut with such force we all jumped back. Sean laughed nervously. "Right, enough's enough. I'm getting out of here." He stormed over to the door and pulled it open. Ash and Dennis were right behind him. I could already see the darkness for myself. The tide had turned, the air had changed, and we weren't alone anymore. "Oh my God," Ash exclaimed as Sean stood trembling, still holding the door handle. I ran over, but Brian never moved. Directly across the landing, the door was now open. I could see into that room for the first time. Liam sat on the floor, a dim candle flickering in front of him, cast dancing shadows distorting his face. "Danny," he whispered. I looked into his glowing yellow serpentine eyes and shivered. He slowly lifted his finger to his mouth and smiled. "Shh." Part 3. We were frozen in our place for a long time while Liam just stared at us. He seemed hazy. He didn't look solid, more like some kind of shimmering apparition. We were too scared to move a muscle. The candlelight danced and flickered, illuminating that thing using Liam's face to mock us. He hunched over and blew the candle out. When the flame died, he was completely swallowed by the darkness, like he'd vanished. And the door slowly closed as we watched in complete awe. There was a thick atmosphere of terror and confusion amongst the group. After the door closed, we still stood exactly as we were. It was another long time before anyone even felt brave enough to breathe, let alone move. Someone took a step back, and soon all of us took a couple of steps back. "Still think we're lying?" I said, shaking my head, mostly directed at Sean. "So what? I mean, your friend Liam's in there. Why didn't you go get him then?" Sean snapped back. "You guys obviously had all this planned or something." "Sean, trust me, that's not Liam. This is how it all started before," Ryan said, moving towards the door. We should just leave, I think," Ash suggested. "Oh, fuck that. This is all bullshit. It's all stupid stories. They've just told him to sit there and try and scare us," Sean blurted out, seemingly in some sort of rage. "Sean, listen to yourself. You're saying our friend, who's been missing for 5 years, just popped up so we could all play a prank on you? Are you out of your bloody mind?" I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "Whatever. I'm not leaving. You're all just full of shite," he exclaimed before heading back to the door. "Right, I'll go into that room and prove it's him, and that he's been hiding in here." "Oh, you're insane, man. You're literally insane," Brian said. "Come on, whoever's leaving with me, let's go." So myself, Brian, and Ash began walking to the stairs. Dennis hung around looking at Sean. "Come on, Sean, let's go, man," Dennis said with his hand on Sean's back. "You can go if you want, mate. I'm going to look around a bit more." Sean began walking over to the room where he'd seen Liam. Dennis shook his head and turned to us as we waited. "Oh, I can't leave him here by himself." And he looked genuinely worried. We turned and continued down the stairs. I could see Sean trying to barge the door open before he was eventually out of sight. Ash and Brian were muttering to each other. Couldn't hear what they were saying as I was listening for anything unusual coming from up the stairs. As we got to the ladder, Ash was having second thoughts about leaving anyone behind. Whatever Brian had been telling him had obviously shaken him up. "Look, we should probably get them," he said. Brian looked at me, and then Ash. "Look, man, me and Danny have been through a lot in here. We came to see if we could get Liam back, and I feel like it's pretty obvious that isn't happening. I'm not going back. If you want to go, then go. I'm going home. Sorry, man." I looked at Brian. I was honestly torn. We'd already left someone behind, and I wasn't sure if I was ready to carry that guilt for anyone else. "Danny?" Ash looked at me for someone to go with him. I don't know, Ash. There's 2 of them there. He isn't alone, but I really think if we're going back, we should all stick together." I shrugged. I was struggling to make any kind of decision here. It was already a bad thing we let someone out of our sights. I already felt like if we did go back, I wouldn't be able to trust either of them now. We were startled then by a crashing sound from above, a horrible hissing and intermittent screams for help. We could hear a scuffle and things being thrown around. We all looked at each other, terrified. "We need to just get out of here. There's nothing we can do," Brian said, ready to get down onto the ladder. Ash began running up the stairs. "Ash, wait," I called to him. "Brian, we can't let him go up there alone." Brian looked down to potential safety, then back up to Ash, who was mindlessly running into potential danger. "Oh, fuck's sake, Danny," he said as he climbed back to his feet. We ran to meet Ash at the top of the stairway. He'd stopped dead in his tracks. Dennis was on the landing, stumbling towards us, muttering to himself. He was covered in dirt and didn't seem to even notice we were there. "Dennis," Ash said. He looked up and saw Ash right in front of him. "Don't," Dennis mumbled as he continued staggering towards the stairs. "Hey, Dennis, wait there," Ash called to him again. He was approaching me and Brian, and I looked into his eyes. His face was bruised and beaten. His eyes seemed normal, but not that it convinced me this really was Dennis, and I cautiously put my hand out and steadied him. "Hey, Dennis, it's us," I said, reassuringly. He started crying like a 5-year-old who'd just fallen off his bike. "Hey, Dennis, what happened? Where's Sean?" Brian asked. Dennis sobbed and fell to the floor. "It's got him. He fell inside the doorway and it closed. All I could hear was him screaming. Then something grabbed me and started smashing me into a wall. Next thing I remember was Ash saying my name. I don't even know how I got down here." I was dubious about the whole situation. I looked at Dennis with skepticism. Ash was already picking him up, but I just wasn't ready to believe anything he said right away. I could tell Brian was the same. Screaming and shouting from above filled the entire area. We heard banging and Sean shouting for Dennis to come back. Ash looked at me, horrified. "We need to go. No fucking around. We need to go and just try and get him." I pulled a knife out of the bag and gave the other one to Brian. "Ash, just help Dennis to walk if he needs. Me and Brian will go first." "I'll be okay. Let's just go and get him," Dennis said. I narrowed my eyes at Dennis. His eagerness to go back upstairs didn't sit well with me. Brian and I turned to head for the stairs. I whispered to Brian, "If he makes any strange moves, I'm stabbing him in the neck and running for my life. I'm not joking, man. I don't trust this." Brian just nodded in agreement as we began to ascend. When we reached the landing, the screaming stopped. The door to the room Sean was in was opening and slamming shut continuously. Dennis and Ash were only a few steps behind. I pulled out the torch and switched it on. It shone over to the rapidly slamming door. Every time it opened, I could see a crooked, opaque face, low down, staring back at us, gaunt with deep black eyes. After a few seconds of the torchlight on the door, it shut and stayed shut. "What do we do?" Ash asked. "I don't know, Ash. I don't necessarily want to go over there, but Dennis said that's where Sean is, so I'm assuming that's where we need to go." I snapped back, feeling pretty pissed off that we'd had to come back because Sean wanted to act like a big hard man. The four of us crept onto the landing. I had the bigger of the two knives held out in one hand in front of me and my torch in the other. I went first. The others kept quietly close. The door opened a crack when I got to within 2 feet of it. "They're coming," I heard a whisper say in a crackled voice. Who they were wasn't abundantly clear. Did it mean us, as in we were coming to the room, or was it a warning that something else would be coming for us? I directed my torch into the small opening. Black pointed fingers slid back inside into the darkness. I closed my eyes. I raised my boot and kicked the door open with such force anything behind it was getting a large dose of wood to the face. The door swung open with such ease, in contrast to how impossible it seemed to open earlier, or even the last time we were here. I swung and stabbed the knife indiscriminately in and around the opening. Nobody else made a sound. When I opened my eyes, my torch lit the room, and we found nobody inside. Brian gave a light shove to my shoulder, urging me to keep going, so we carefully entered the room. I'd never seen behind this door, so everything was as new to me as it was to Ash and Dennis. There were barred windows, broken wooden beds with shackles cemented into the walls and floor near each one. The floor felt almost sticky. Some kind of tar-like substance had been intentionally spilled all around, making weird shapes on the ground. The stone-circled fire pit sat in the center, and there were crude drawings and symbols lining the walls. And the smell was unbearable. I choked. I had to leave, and the others weren't far behind. "What was all that shit?" Ash asked, coughing as he spoke. "No idea, man. Let's just not go in there again, though, eh?" I said, catching my breath. Dennis seemed okay, which drew a little more suspicion on him. Well, from me and Brian, at least. I could see Brian glancing at him every now and then. I was reluctant to take my eyes off him myself. We looked up the stairs. It led to the 4th floor. I didn't want to go any further, but it looked like we had to. If anything, I didn't want to reach those bells again. Dennis and Ash had already started climbing the stairs. I looked at my knife, then I looked to Brian. We both followed, keeping a few steps behind. I almost fell down the stairs when the door to the room we were just in slammed shut. Ash whimpered. "I don't like this. I want to get out of here." "We all do, Ash. Just make sure we stick together and we'll make it," I said to him, trying to calm him down. We approached the 4th landing. To the right I saw the door to our base room. It was slightly ajar. "Hey Brian, that's the safe room we were in last time. We should go in there." I flashed the torch over to the door. "I forgot about that," he said. "Hey, everybody, head in there," Brian commanded, pushing past Ash and Dennis. Entering that room again, it felt exactly as it did before. Safe. Comforting. I don't know why, but this room seemed completely detached from the rest of the building. The old cabinets and broken ancient furniture still sat where we'd left them. I made my way to the window and I looked out. This time it wasn't sadness I felt looking outside. It was determination. I was determined to get all of us out of here alive. As I looked out, the wind was brushing the trees. I could almost smell the fresh air as I gazed up to the moon and the stars above, and began to wonder, why the fuck were the moon and the stars out? And it couldn't have been any later than 2 or 3 p.m. Guys, I started, glaring with confusion at the darkened forest surrounding us. Well, nobody noticed. They were all looking around and chatting amongst themselves. "Guys," I called again. I turned to see everyone stop what they were doing and look over to me. Not one of them seemed shocked. "Doesn't, anybody see anything wrong here?" I asked, bewildered by the fact that still none of them had any idea what I was talking about. "Look," I pointed out the window. Well, they all looked at me like I was insane. "Oh my God." I put my hand on my face. "Brian, what time is it?" He twigged straight away. I saw the second his mind had put it together, and his jaw dropped. "What the fuck? How long have we been in here for?" Ash and Dennis looked equally shocked as they realized. "I don't know. 2 hours max, I'd say," Ash said. And the wind outside began to howl. I looked out again, absolutely dumbfounded at what I was looking at. Bumps and scraping noises accompanied the howling wind. The window seemed to rattle in its frame. Something stirred inside the room. One of the smaller cabinets started to shake, getting progressively more violent. We We all took a few steps back and huddled together. And then it stopped. The soft click of a latch broke the silence, and the cabinet door creaked open. Liam's head poked out of the partially open door. "Hey, come and look at this," he said as his face disappeared back inside. We stood silent. "Just head for the door," I said to everyone. We inched to the side, never taking our eyes off the cabinet in front of us. Another click of a door opening behind us. We all turned in unison. The cupboard door had opened only about an inch, but a hand began to emerge, sliding along the other door that was still closed. Long pointed fingers tapped and scraped the old wood as they danced along the cabinet door. The arm began to stretch out, quickly getting longer and longer as he made its way to the door to the landing. We kept moving, taking small but quick steps, and we made it to the door first. And the cupboard door burst open as we began to exit the room. A tall black figure was crouching inside. It looked right up at us, directly into my eyes, and its gaze burned. Then the creature let out a scream and, in an instant, darted towards us. We all hurried out and pulled the door shut, loud banging coming from the other side as the door rattled and cracked. We held it shut with everything we had. "We need to go somewhere. We need to run. Just run down the stairs," I cried out. Then on the count of 3, we let go and ran for the stairs to head down. As we got to the stairway, we could see, at the bottom, slowly crawling up each step, was the same contorted, jagged black figure, smiling and laughing at us as its hands and feet approached to scorch and crumble the stone beneath it. We were once again frozen in fear as the beast slowly got closer. We only had one other way to run. Up. "Oh, fuck," I screeched. "Okay, everyone, up the stairs." We all turned, stumbling over each other as we clamoured for the stairs leading up. It was clear. We sprinted up as fast as we could. I could see the stairway to the bells come into view as we approached the 5th floor landing. The 2 rooms on either side of the stairs had closed doors. We could hear faint whimpering coming from one of the rooms. We couldn't tell which one. Maybe it was both. I couldn't think straight. The left door was where we'd found Liam lying in some sort of ritualistic manner. And the right door? Well, we'd never seen what lay behind the right door. We took a minute to catch our breath. Ash and Dennis seemed to recognize the whimpering as coming from Sean, but like me, they couldn't tell where it was coming from. "We need to pick a room to try first," Brian said. "We found Liam in that room before." He continued gesturing to the left door. "Yeah, there was something in that other one. We didn't go in there," I added. Dennis looked at both doors. "Why don't we just do 2 of us in each?" he asked. Ash glanced at us approvingly. "No, we stay together, no splitting up. Dennis," Brian cut in, using air quotes when he said the name Dennis. "What the fuck is that supposed to mean?" Dennis snapped back sharply. "Oh, you tell me. You're constantly trying to split us up. Are you even who you say you are?" Brian stepped forward now, waving his knife. "Oh, you're fucking paranoid, Brian. Put that knife away. You look like..." "Everyone shut up," I interrupted. "We need to stick together. Stop fighting. Let's just try the left one first, and we all go," I said, as I ushered Ash and Dennis in front of us. I gave Brian a stern look. He wasn't too pleased. "Oh, come on, Brian. We can do this, man. Just keep it together." I patted his back, and we followed the others. We slowly walked to the door, listening intently for any noises, either from inside or anywhere, really. Then Ash pushed the door open. Just like before, Sean lay in almost exactly the same way Liam had 5 years ago, although he was awake and he was just weeping to himself. lying in matted tar-like mud, surrounded by crystals and symbols, clothes torn and ragged with cuts and burns all over his body. He didn't even see us come in. Ash strode over to see Sean. "Sean, it's us, man. We need to get you up. We need to get you out of here," Ash said, patting his face. "God, he's absolutely freezing," Ash exclaimed. "Come on, mate. Time to get up." Sean still failed to recognize Ash's presence, or any of us for that matter. He just wept and mumbled to himself. We staggered out to the landing with Sean. The whimpering from the other room was still audible. "Should we, Jake?" I asked reluctantly. "Well, I don't know, man. We've got Sean. We should just go," Brian replied. "Oh, yeah, we do, but what about Liam? I mean, you never know. What if he could be in there?" "Danny," Brian started with a look of disapproval. "Okay, shout him then. Don't go in, just shout his name." Put my ear to the door and could hear the whimpering of someone on the other side, and I hesitated. "Liam," I called out. Silence. "Liam," I called again, putting my ear to the door. Who's there? Who's there? Please, whoever's there, please, help me." I took a step back in shock. I mean, it was Liam's voice, but was this another trick? I looked at Brian. He wasn't happy to see me contemplating kicking this door in. "I need to, Brian," I said as I passed him my bag. "We have to take any chance we get." Brian shook his head. I turned and kicked the door. Well, the latch broke pretty easily. A thick wave of dust rushed from the dark room, and the smell was putrid. I could see a figure a few feet away. "Danny," he said. He fell to his knees and began to cry. "Danny," he sobbed. He came closer to me. I was absolutely shocked at the sight of his emaciated face, his drawn-in cheeks, eyes sunken into the sockets. His head looked little more than a skull. His dark, cavernous mouth bore little to no teeth and was rounded by cracked lips, blackened by old, dried blood. His body looked frail and skeletal, covered in cuts and bruises. His clothes were almost non-existent. He crawled over to me. I sat on the ground before him. "Oh, Liam, I'm so sorry, man. Can we get you out of here now? Can we get you home?" I asked him, hoping I could lift any part of his spirits. Liam came closer still and eventually fell over my lap. I was holding him almost like a baby. "Oh, man, you left me here," he said, struggling to get a breath. "You and Brian left me here. Why did you leave me here?" My eyes whirled. God, I hated myself. Looking at him like this made me feel 100 times worse. "Danny," I heard Brian call to me. "Leave him. We need to go." His voice was straight to the point and serious. I couldn't see what Brian was seeing, but I didn't have to. I already knew. I already knew it wasn't Liam. But seeing him in this state made me think about what really happened to him. Was this how he ended up? I truly think we are being shown what became of Liam. I cried as his limp body lay across my lap, struggling to breathe, struggling to stay alive. God, is this what his last moments were like? Thought about his family, how hard it had been for them, losing their son, suspicion constantly drawn on them, dealing with daily accusations about his disappearance when we know they had nothing to do with it. Liam coughed and spluttered. Some horrible black saliva landed on my arm. I looked into his yellow eyes, and I knew it wasn't him. "Danny, we need to go, like now," Brian called again, more urgency in his tone. I put my knife to Liam's throat. "I'm sorry," I sobbed. He looked shocked and scared, but I wasn't being fooled this time. I slid the knife with ease into his throat all the way until it came out the back. And no blood spilled. I threw his body off of me, but the knife was stuck. My hand was stuck. I tried to pull at it, but it wouldn't budge. Purple and black veins twisted out from the wound, snaked up the blade and onto the handle, around my hand, and twisted all the way up to my shoulder, binding me with so much strength I lost the feeling in my arm. Liam's body went into convulsions. His bones snapped and his limbs contorted. His head fell further back as his neck elongated, pulling the knife and my arm with it. Two burning hands on the end of impossibly long arms grabbed my face. I'd let myself get caught. If I wasn't so terrified, I'd be asking myself, how could I be so stupid? There was no chance I was getting away this time. "Danny!" I heard Brian scream. "Just run," I told them. "Just run." I felt like I'd given up any hope. I felt the energy completely drained from my body. My eyes began rolling back. All I could see in a haze of grey mist was a grinning face with chiseled, sharp features and glowing yellow eyes. A face of coal, of smouldering ash. I couldn't help but think that this is probably the end for me. I could hear the bells. I could feel the wind on my face. There was nothing I could do. My body was paralyzed. The face got closer to me. The bells rang louder. The hot, arid, sulfuric stench of the beast's breath filled my lungs. I choked. I couldn't breathe. This was it. I'd let myself linger too long and I was caught. The creature jolted. A terribly painful shock ran through my body like a bolt of lightning. The startled face twisted in ways I couldn't even imagine being possible. I was mesmerized by the control this thing had over every part of itself. I could see the yellow eyes grow brighter. The beast looked into the distance. A bright orange glow came from above me, getting progressively bigger and brighter, like a sunrise over a clear sky, gradually coming more into view. A huge chaotic ball of fire seemed to burn right before me, continuous, never faltering. Was this some kind of message from beyond? God, what was this? The beast recoiled in fear, and what seemed like pain. I could feel my life draining from me as it latched onto my body with everything it had. Slowly, the burning on my arms and legs began to ease. My body regained mobility. I could feel again. My senses had started to process my surroundings more efficiently, and I was able to understand what was happening. The bells had stopped. The wind had stopped. The pain, the confusion, the feeling of being drained on my very soul, it had all stopped in an instant, as I was able to sit up and see Brian standing in front of me with a can of hairspray and a lighter in his hands. He looked at me. By the expression on his face, I could tell I must have been in a bit of a bad state. Brian offered his hand. I lifted my arm to take it. Pain shot through my whole body. Brian helped me up to my feet, and I noticed we were at the bells. "Oh, how did I get up here?" I asked. I had no idea how long ago I'd blacked out, or how I'd ended up at the bells. "I don't know. We got thrown from the room and the door slammed shut. All we could hear was you screaming, then everything went quiet," Brian explained. "A few minutes later, the bells were chiming, and I thought we should at least look. When I got up the stairs, you looked like you were having a seizure, and that thing was right in your face." "Oh, thanks, man. Thanks for not giving up on me," I said. Even talking was accompanied by great pain. I looked around. "Yeah, where's everyone else?" "Oh, they're downstairs. They didn't want to go any higher," Brian replied, sounding disappointed. "William's not coming back, is he?" My head hung in shame as I spoke. "I don't think so, Danny. We just need to make sure we all get out of here now. We tried our best. Now we need to stay alive." Brian put his arm around me to help me walk. Although I felt okay to walk myself, I was still grateful for the hand. I could see Dennis, Ash, and Sean at the bottom of the stairs, staring up with horrified looks on their faces. "You okay?" Ash called up. "I'll be fine," I answered, taking my time on the steps. We got to the 5th landing, and we were all reunited. "Let's get out of here before any other shit happens," Sean exclaimed. If only that was his thinking earlier. We began our descent. 4th floor, 3rd floor, 2nd floor. We started on the steps to take the ladder to the 1st floor. Psst. My ears pricked up. I looked around. Psst. I looked up. Something was falling slowly, dancing and swooshing in the air as it fell. Not like a small square piece of paper. It landed right at my feet. It was a Polaroid. With trembling hands, I picked it up and flipped it round. Oh, the look of fear was clearly evident on my face as everybody looked worried. "What is it?" Dennis asked. I narrowed my eyes and looked at him with suspicion. I turned the photo to show the others. It was a Polaroid of Dennis, like he'd taken a selfie. His black toothy grin and yellow serpentine eyes sent a shiver down my spine as in the background I could see Sean, Ash and Brian watching me kicking a door. The door on the 5th floor where Liam was. Brian immediately held his knife to Dennis's neck. Part 5. Brian pressed the blade into Dennis's neck almost to the point of breaking the skin. "What the fuck are you doing? That's not real. That's not me," Dennis stuttered as he panicked. I could see him visibly shaking. Ash and Sean took a few steps back up the stairs towards me. Brian grabbed Dennis by the collar and threw him to the ground, knife still pressed to his neck. "I knew it," he said. "I knew there was something weird about the way you were acting." "Brian, I swear, I never took that picture, I swear." "Shut up. Where's Dennis? What's happened to him?" There was pure aggression in Brian's voice. "I'm Dennis. I never took that photo. You need to believe me, it wasn't me." Dennis did sound like he was genuinely panicking, but we'd all heard that before. "What does this mean?" Ash asked sheepishly, looking terrified. "It means Dennis has been taken. Whatever that thing is that had me up the stairs, it has Dennis too. This isn't the real Dennis, and we need to get as far away from it as quickly as possible." I took another step back. I was now back on the 2nd floor, looking down. Brian was still on the last couple of steps, holding Dennis with the knife to his throat. He was in a huge fit of rage I'd never seen from him before, as he screamed in Dennis's face. "Fucking leave us alone. Let us leave. Just let us leave and we'll never come back." Dennis pleaded with him. "Oh, please, Brian. You need to listen to me, man. I'm me. I never took a photo. Why the fuck would I even use to take a photo?" "He has a point, to be fair," Ash piped up. "Where would you have gotten a Polaroid camera from?" "What he used to take the photo was irrelevant. The Polaroid itself is significant, not how it came to be," I informed him. Ash looked at me, confused. As we watched the struggle between Brian and Dennis, I could see a dark silhouette slowly climbing the ladder, and my heart stopped. Messy, wild, colourful hair, and a pure chalk-white face, 2 tiny eyes glowing like lasers trained on us, the dripping red paint around the mouth, jagged, stained teeth forming a menacing grin. I could see the familiar baggy black and white checkered suit, stained red with blood. "Welcome to hell, children." The shrill voice made my bones itch. I could see Brian partially release Dennis as he watched this clown still climbing the ladder, making its way up. Dennis slid from under Brian's grasp and backed away. Ash and Sean stepped back some more. Sean tripped and fell, but never took his eyes off the advancing clown. "What is that? What's going on?" Sean stammered, sliding back, kicking rubble as his feet slid on the ground. The clown moved in a jerking fashion. Its gaze alternated between us all, and then met my eyes. I looked away. I was speechless. One hand on the crumbled first stair, Brian was still frozen. The clown grabbed his leg and began to pull Brian over, but he managed to pull himself back up, but couldn't grip onto anything. The clown laughed and tugged at his leg. I snapped into action. I carefully ran down the remaining stairs and grabbed Brian's hand. "Quick, someone grab a knife or something," I screamed to the top of the stairs. The clown repeated its phrases over and over again as its head shook and its hand pulled. They were still just standing at the top watching. "God, did anyone hear me? Fucking help!" I screamed again. I saw Dennis coming down with my knife in his hand. My heart sank a little. I wasn't too sure how this would play out. He reached me and took another 2 steps down until he was level with Brian's head. I closed my eyes as Brian raised the knife. I heard frantic hacking sounds and ear-piercing screams. I opened my eyes. Dennis had almost chopped the clown's arm off. He brought the large blade down 2 or 3 more times, and the clown almost fell backwards as Brian was quickly released. Brian made a swift move forward and booted the clown in the face. Fucking clown," he cried, his voice shaking with fear and anger. I peered over the edge. The clown was gone. Its arm remained with a tight grip on Brian's leg, but the clown was completely gone. "Get this thing off me," Brian said as he desperately pulled at the severed arm. "Hey, everyone, just get down and get out of here now," Brian commanded, and we all obeyed. We climbed down the ladder. Brian went first, then I went, happy not to fall off this time. Dennis next, and as we bolted for the door, Dennis held the ladder steady for Ash and Sean. The front door was closed, but I could see cracks of light through the splintered wood. Couldn't get out of there fast enough. We almost fell in a heap as we scrambled through the door. Ash emerged and fell immediately to the grass. Then Sean, who stopped at the threshold and looked back to Dennis. There was an almighty clatter of metal from inside. It sounded like the ladder. "Dennis!" Sean yelped as he darted back inside. Ash looked shocked. He got up and looked inside to see what was going on. "Oh my God, Dennis," he said as he disappeared back into the building. Brian and I approached the doorway cautiously. I could see them moving around, picking Dennis up off the ground. 10 or 15 seconds later, Ash and Sean came walking out with Dennis hanging over their shoulders. "The ladder fell and smacked his head," Sean said. Dennis had blood-soaked hair with some more dribbling down his face. "He can't drive then. Someone grab his keys," Brian said, holding out his hand. Ash fumbled around in one of Dennis's pockets and produced a car key. He found the slit in the fence and let Ash and Sean maneuver Dennis through. I could feel eyes on me from somewhere. I didn't feel threatened, I just felt like I was being watched. I then turned and looked the old bell tower up and down. I vowed to myself I would never return to this place. As my gaze reached the top, in one of the arches, Liam sat on the stone ledge watching us. He looked exactly like I remembered him from 5 years ago. I waved up at him. He didn't respond. He looked sad. My gut wrenched seeing him looking normal again. I felt crippling guilt. Brian looked at me as I was holding my hand up. "What are you doing?" he said as he turned and looked up. "It's Liam," I replied, looking to see his reaction. Brian looked and I looked back, but he was gone. Barely a word was spoken in the car. Ash, Sean and Dennis sat in the back. I sat in the front and Brian drove. He dropped the keys at Sean's house and assured Dennis he'd drop me off and return the car before walking home. Dennis didn't seem to care. They were all too quick to get out of the car and rush into Sean's house. The sun was low in the sky, and the light burned my eyes. It felt nice driving with the window down. The air cooled my face and made me feel better. But my body and my mind felt exhausted. "Never again," Brian said. It's the first thing he'd said the whole journey. "Oh, definitely never again," I replied. I really meant it. I would never set foot within the perimeter of that fence. Brian pulled up to my house and parked. He looked at me. He wanted to say something but couldn't. I could see sadness in his eyes. Liam's never coming back. We need to accept that and move on, he said eventually. I know. I just hate carrying that guilt with me everywhere, every day. Brian put his hand on my shoulder. I know, Danny. I do too. We'll get through it, man. Always stick together no matter what. I nodded. I got out of the car and Brian drove away. Nobody seemed to be home, so I went in, got some water, and went to my room to lie down. I needed to have a bath or something to help with all the pains over my body, but I was just too tired. I was watching a TV program called Still Game. I wanted something funny to try and take my mind off everything, and before I knew it, I must have blacked out at some point. It was night time, and TV was about 12 episodes ahead of where I last remembered. I'd had a couple of text messages and a few missed calls from Brian. The first one was 4 hours ago, and it read, "Just dropped the car off at Sean's. Tried to see how Dennis was doing, but they wouldn't answer the door. On my way home now. Hope you're all right, mate." The next message, from only 30 minutes ago, said, "Tried phoning a few times. Are you okay, Danny?" I should probably phone him. And something tapped on my window. I froze. It happened again. I was scared stiff. Then my phone buzzed. Another text from Brian. It's probably him trying to get my attention at the window. I picked up my phone and walked over, feeling a little more relaxed. Brian wasn't there. Illuminated by the dim streetlight, 3 figures stood in the road, staring up at my window. I could just make out who it was. Ash, Dennis, and Sean. Their slightly distorted faces all stared right at me, beckoning me down. Their glowing yellow eyes held my gaze. I shuddered, and I was startled when my phone started ringing. Brian was phoning me. I put the phone to my ear without saying anything. I couldn't think of any words. "Danny, something weird as fuck has just happened. I'm gonna try and come round yours, man. I don't want to be by myself." Brian sounded frantic. "No, don't," I said. "What?" "Don't, Brian," I repeated. He was silent for a while. Are they there too?" he asked quietly, stuttering. "They're here." "Shit, how's that possible? God, I'm looking at them right now, out my window," Brian said, sounding absolutely bewildered. I couldn't understand it myself. They were at his house too? My train of thought was interrupted by Brian talking. "What's going on, man? How did this happen?" He continued. I couldn't tell if he was asking me directly or asking himself rhetorically. "I don't know," I said, "but we shouldn't go anywhere near them. Just stay inside." And I heard the bells coming from Brian's end through the phone speaker. Brian sighed. "Oh, do you hear that?" "I hear it, but only through the phone." "Oh, I need to go, man. I'm putting my headphones in. I'm sick of hearing those fucking bells." Brian sounded almost hysterical and quickly hung up before I could even say goodbye. "Don't go outside," I quickly shouted down the phone, just to remind him. Whether he heard me or not, I couldn't tell you. When the line went dead, I could still hear the bells, and they were gradually getting louder. I glanced out the window once more. They were still standing there, waving me down. Oh, no fucking chance. It's been just over a week now, and every night they come. Every single night the bells ring at midnight without fail. They're outside my house. Sometimes Liam's with them, sometimes not. Well, I haven't spoken to Brian in a while. I'm just hoping, praying that I don't look out one night and see that he's joined them. I should probably phone and make sure he's okay, and remind him not to go outside. In 2017, me and a couple of friends went to an old bell tower looking for an adventure. I could never have imagined what horror lay in wait for us. We barely made it out alive, and one of our dearest friends went missing. 5 years later, we returned to look for him. There had been recent sightings near the tower. We assembled a small crew, and against our best judgment, we went back. What happened there has scarred me physically and mentally for life. Whatever we've disturbed from the old bell tower near my house has started to affect my town, by Reggae Junkie Gee. Part 1. Well, we managed to escape again, only just. But then people started going missing around town. Everybody's keeping it all hushed up. Nobody wants to talk about what's going on, and now it seems to be spreading like wildfire. I really hope this was all over. In the week after we got out, there was a night they didn't show up outside my window, and I felt the biggest weight off my shoulders. But now things seem to be getting worse. My dad, who works in the distillery, has a shift rotation every 4 weeks. Day shift 7 a.m. to 3 p.m, twilight shift 2:30 to 10:30 p.m, and then night shift 10 p.m. to 7:30 a.m. After Ash, Dennis, and Sean started showing up at my window, I had to tell him about it. His twilight shift started the next day, on the Monday. I begged him to believe me, but he assumed I was just talking about suspicious people hanging around after dark, and that's what he told the police. I can't say I blame him for not believing me, but it still annoyed me. My dad's work is a little over an hour away, so he sometimes gets home on a good night at 11:30. Sometimes it can be midnight before he gets in. I told him how they always show up at midnight, when the bells ring. Well, he just nodded along, only half listening. God, I'm freaking 19, not 9. I'm not lying. But he just thought I was trying to play some kind of joke. That night I heard the bells and I ran to get him. He was still awake, getting his sleeping pattern in check for the awkward shift times. We went to the window, and sure enough, I could have almost predicted what would happen. They never showed up. The bells clanging away, loud as hell, but they were nowhere to be seen. You can at least hear the bells, I asked, feeling annoyed that I now looked insane. Yeah. He pointed his ear to the window. Oh yeah, I hear them. Oh, that's weird, he said, and side glanced at me before turning away. Well, I knew he couldn't hear them. Dad, you can't hear that. Oh, it's loud as fuck. I pressed him, feeling deflated. Danny, get to bed, son. I'll see you in the morning. He left my room, closing the door behind him. I tried phoning Brian again for probably the 800th time, with no answer. However, on Monday, before my dad left work, I was finally able to get hold of him. Brian, where the hell have you been? I've been in my bedroom with the blinds closed. I haven't left for over a week. I didn't hear the bells last night. Did you? He asked, and his voice sounded weak. He sounded like his whole body was deteriorating. Yeah, I heard them, but they never came to the window. I tried to get my dad to look, but they didn't show up. Well, he couldn't hear the bells either. I think I'm about one step away from being bundled into a white van and spending the next couple of years in a straitjacket. Brian laughed. I need to get out of here, Danny. This is no way to live. If I have to look at another pot noodle, I think I'm going to have a mental breakdown. I've been shitting through the eye of a needle, man. I couldn't help but laugh. Well, the situation was far from funny. All right, Brian, come here tonight. We can get something to eat, and you won't be by yourself. My dad starts the twilight shift soon, so it'd be good to have you here. Aye, that sounds good. I'll get ready and I'll be over about 5. Aye, no worries, mate. I'll see you soon. The sound of my dad getting ready to leave for work caught my attention, so I went downstairs to see him. Dad, I know you don't believe me, but just try and get home as early as you can tonight. I'll always try and get home early, Danny, he said with a smirk on his face. But, you know what I mean, even earlier. Just do it. Right, okay, whatever. Look, I'll be home as soon as I can. He turned to grab his work bag and keys, kissed my mum and patted my back on the way out. When the door closed, I don't know what it was, but a horrible feeling took over me. Please don't let this be the last time I see him, I thought to myself. I went back to my room, really just waiting around for Brian now. My mum kept coming in to check on me. Well, they obviously both think I've lost my mind. After 5 o'clock came and went, I started to get a bit restless, worrying. Well, I knew he'd probably just be running late, but a part of me had doubts and I didn't like it. It was giving me a bad feeling. Around 5:40 p.m, Brian showed up at last. I was trying my best to contact him constantly, but I never got an answer until he was standing on my doorstep. Brian, late as ever, I gestured. Come on in. I led him into the back lounge, which is kind of like a dining room, but not really. My mum was in the adjoining kitchen making dinner, but we didn't want dinner. We wanted a feast, so we sat down and ordered loads of takeaway food. Brian seemed reluctant to talk. Well, he was giving mostly yes or no answers, or keeping answers to a 2 or 3 word minimum. It was close to 10:30 before Brian started to engage in a proper conversation. He was asking about my dad. Did you say he finished at 10:30? Yeah. I've told him to try and get away fast and come home early. He still thinks I'm a loony, though. Brian laughed. Well, hopefully he gets home sharpish. My mum popped her head into my room. I'm going to bed, boys. Good night. Good night, Brian, she said. Night, we both responded at the same time. There were a few moments of silence, and then Brian piped up again. What do you think it is? In the bell tower, I mean. Well, I haven't got the slightest idea. Some unbelievably belligerent and malicious thing that takes people. I wouldn't even know what to call it, I said, and I genuinely had no clue. People always said witches haunted that area. Maybe it's them, or maybe they summoned something or some things that got out of control. I don't know. I'm just wondering. Brian then bowed his head. Played a couple of games of FIFA before I got bored because Brian always annihilated me. It felt like we were waiting forever before I noticed the clock was finally nearing 11:30. I waited anxiously by the window, looking for my dad's car. 11:30 came and went. Nothing. 11:40. Still nothing. As the clock approached 11:50, I started to panic. Only a matter of time before the bells chime and they show up outside. God, I was pacing back and forth. Hurry up, Dad, I spoke to myself as Brian sat nervously watching me. A flash of headlights outside caught me off guard. I shot over to the window. It was the police, driving up and down the street. I looked up at the clock again. 11:55 p.m. My heart sank. Then a loud clicking of the deadbolt being unlatched, and the front door opening startled me. I ran to the top of the stairs and looked down. My dad was stumbling through the doorway, looking disheveled. Oh, Dad, you're finally home, and I smiled. He ambled into the hallway and glanced at me before shaking his head. He looked tired and fed up. I'm going to bed, he mumbled. I could only barely make out what he said. He climbed the stairs and pretty much pushed past me as he made his way to his bedroom, shutting the door behind him. I went back to my room where Brian was eagerly awaiting my return. Headlights then caught my attention from the window again. I saw the police car driving back and forth for another few minutes. We both eyed the clock as the second hand seemed to be in no rush to tick its way to midnight. Oh, that last 30 seconds felt like 30 minutes. 3, 2, 1. We both held our breath. I looked at Brian. The sound of the clock was all we could hear. I looked back up. 12:01 a.m. The bells didn't ring. I darted to the window and looked outside. The police car was parked about 2 houses over. There was absolutely nothing else to see. I smiled and turned to Brian. There's nothing there, I said. I exhaled and my mind felt pure relief. Brian didn't want to believe anything too soon, but I could see the tension in his body begin to wane. I looked out again, and the police car was gone. Maybe it worked then. Maybe nothing happened because other people would find out or other people would see. I don't care. Don't care. I would finally be able to sleep worry-free, even if just for one night. Brian began to ease up some more. "Oh, maybe it's over," he said, seeming unsure of his own words. Maybe," I responded, gazing out of the window. Game of FIFA?" Brian's mood seemed to have shifted in an instant. "Honestly, man, I just want to go to sleep," I replied, and Brian laughed. "Shite bag." I smiled and looked out of the window one last time. It was 10 past midnight and still nothing, and I couldn't have been happier in that moment. I set Brian up on the floor with some blankets and cushions and then switched the light off. Just before I got into bed, "Danny," Brian whispered. "What's up? Sorry, man, but would it be alright if we left the light on?" Oh, and I felt so bad for him. "Just any light. I can't handle total darkness. I'm sorry, man." Well, he sounded upset. "Don't be sorry, mate. It's fine. I'll put the TV on, and I'll put my computer on," I said as I plugged my TV into the wall. "Thanks." "Yeah, no problem." I turned my PC on, fired up the monitor, then got into bed. I put a random channel on. They were showing A Nightmare on Elm Street. I saw Brian turn away from the TV. I switched it over to Comedy Central. 2 episodes of The Ricky Gervais Show and then 2 of South Park were shown in the guide. Perfect. I lay back and tried to turn my brain off, but my mind was still racing, as it always was, and I'd had trouble sleeping ever since the first day in the bell tower. It was barely past 1 a.m. when the hall light went on. The slit of light at the bottom of my door caught my attention. Dad must be going for a piss, I thought to myself. My vision was a little blurry because I was about 5 seconds away from dozing off, but I could make out the shadows of feet walking down the hall towards the toilet. I closed my eyes. Footsteps coming back along the hall seemed to wake me, or was I even asleep there? Back again towards the toilet. I heard mumbling, quiet and then incoherent mumbling again. Back past my room again. And again. And then they stopped. They stopped right at my door. I looked at Brian to see if he'd noticed what was happening. All I could see were his wide eyes staring at the 2 shadows at the bottom of my door. He'd pulled the blanket up, almost completely covering his face. After a couple of very long minutes, the shadows walked away again, in the direction of the stairs. I didn't know what to think. Should I be worried? "Danny, what's going on?" Brian's muffled voice came from beneath his blanket. "I don't know. I think my dad's sleepwalking or something." "Oh, go and look." Brian jerked his thumb in the direction of the door. "Fuck off. I'm not looking," I snapped back. "So you're just gonna let a random person walk around your house?" "Look, it's obviously not a random person. They came from the end of the hall. It's my mum and dad's room. There's nothing else up there." "Right. Okay." Brian didn't believe me for some reason. Well, it was my dad. I just didn't understand what he was doing or why. After about half an hour, we heard rummaging downstairs, things being moved, lots of walking around, and my dad's voice talking. I looked at Brian again. He'd fallen asleep. I just tried my best to ignore whatever he was doing and get myself to sleep. That wasn't easy, but I did eventually fall asleep. When I woke up in the morning, Brian was standing at my window looking puzzled. I rubbed my eyes as they adjusted to the brightness. "What are you doing?" Brian never looked at me. He just said, "Come here." His voice sounded weak. I climbed out of bed and made my way to the window, which looked out into my front garden and driveway. My dad, looking like he'd been up all night, almost looked like he was homeless. He was pacing around the garden, mumbling to himself, talking fast and making wild gestures that seemed to be involuntary and twitching. He just looked like a complete mess. Another thing I noticed was his car windscreen was completely shattered. I opened the window then, but Brian grabbed my hand. "Remember what William was last seen doing before he disappeared?" he asked, keeping his voice down. "Yeah, but this isn't the same. Surely, this is my dad. This isn't the same thing." I was doubting my own words as I stumbled over them. "Dad!" I called out the window. Well, he stopped immediately and looked up. "What are you doing? I thought I was the loony," I said with a slight nervous smile. He smiled back for a second, and then, without hesitation, he bolted to the car and started it up, reversed out the drive like a maniac, almost hitting another 2 cars, and then floored it down the street. We didn't know what to do or say. We just ran down the stairs and into the street, only to see his car turn left towards the town centre. "What the? We need to phone someone. The police or something," Brian said. Yeah, get inside. We need to do something, quickly." I then led Brian back into the house. My mum led us inside, looking like she'd just woken up. She had no idea what had just happened. Dad was acting weird, and he just sped away in his car with his window all smashed up. Did he say anything to you?" She looked worried. "No, I don't even remember him coming home last night. What was he doing?" "He was walking around, talking to himself. They jumped in his car and drove away. I don't even know how he can see out of his windscreen." Well, she picked up the phone and dialed 999 at once. A swift 3 hours later, 2 officers are sitting in my lounge asking my mum a series of questions, while Brian and I were standing listening at the doorway. They seemed to be taking nothing too seriously. Well, this all felt like a big, stupid waste of time. Until... I can't be 100%. Maybe I am finally losing it, but... Well, the officer taking notes and more or less nodding along to the entire conversation. I could swear he looked at me and smiled, just for a split second. A large crooked smile that seemed to disappear almost instantly, but his glowing yellow eyes burned right into mine for what felt like an eternity. It lasted less than a second, but that look is permanently imprinted in my mind and I can't shake it off. My blood ran ice cold as I watched them both get up and move slowly towards my mum as she took a sip of her coffee. Part 2. "Mum!" I yelped, holding my arm outstretched. She looked over to me, barely noticing the advancing policeman. Ryan looked shocked and confused at my outburst, like he was ready to run, but didn't know why. "Get back!" I screeched as one of the officers' glowing yellow eyes met mine. His foaming black-toothed grin gave me a feeling of being stabbed in the stomach. The room began to distort and twist. I could have sworn I was spinning, or the rest of the world was. The sun had more or less disappeared and darkness began to creep in all around me. I hunched over in pain as I watched the other officer slowly extend his hand. My mum gazed at him, seemingly in a trance-like state. I struggled to force any more words from my mouth. My mum took his hand and slowly stood up, eyes locked with the officer. "Thank you for your time, Mrs. Corcoran," he said. In a flash, I found myself on the ground, retching, feeling vulnerable and weak. I looked up. My mum was shaking hands with the policeman. "Oh, thank you so much for coming. If I hear anything, I'll phone straight away," she said. "Danny, you okay?" I looked around and saw Brian kneeling on the other side of me, looking concerned. My mum and the police officers noticed and dashed to pick me up. My mum was panicking and the 2 officers helped me to my feet. "You all right there, son?" the older one said, while my head was still spinning. God, did I just imagine that? I thought to myself. "I'm fine. I'm okay. Just felt a bit dizzy and a bit sick," I replied. The young guy helped me to the couch. I was wary of him touching me after that smile I'd seen earlier, but he seemed normal. He seemed absolutely fine. "Thanks. Honestly, I'm okay," I reassured them, while trying to motion to my mum to get them out of the house. "Well, okay, as long as you're feeling better," the young officer said, flashing that wide grin of perfect white teeth, in contrast starkly to earlier. Could I be sure I'd seen that? Or maybe I did imagine it. I watched from the window as the two officers hastily left and got into their car. As they pulled away, the younger officer side-glanced at me and winked, his eye changing from white to yellow for a split second before they were out of view. I stood with my mouth hanging open. Brian put a finger under my chin and closed my mouth for me. "What's wrong, Danny?" Brian looked worried. "That guy, that police guy, he was different." "Different how?" Brian asked. I turned and looked at him, shaking my head. "Like, Belter different. His eyes and his face, something wasn't right." I began feeling the stabbing pain in my stomach once again. "Maybe you just imagined it. Everything seemed fine to me. Except you almost dying," he sniggered. "I don't know, man. Maybe, but I feel sick. I need to lie down a minute, and then we're going out to look for my dad." Brian quickly realized it wasn't a time for joking around. He took on a more serious demeanor. "Head upstairs and lie down. I'll get you in 15 minutes. He patted my back as I walked away. Lying staring at my ceiling, I couldn't help but question my own sanity. Nothing had ever happened outside the bell tower before. Then again, Sean and the others had been showing up outside my house. Maybe whatever was in there had managed to get out somehow. I felt my eyes heavy. The bell tower plagued my mind and my senses. I felt myself beginning to doze off, and the bells rang off in the distance, and my body felt heavy. I was slipping away into sleep. I found myself standing within the perimeter of the fence. Sean was kicking the door to the bell tower. It splintered and cracked, eventually bursting open as I looked on, feeling the most unreal déjà vu. "Simple as that," he chuckled as he turned to me with his face covered in black, pulsing veins. The door, the latch, and most of the wood holding it in place completely ripped off. Sean laughed like a maniac as his eyes pulled me closer towards him. I almost fell out of my bed as Brian burst in the room. "Feeling any better?" he asked. My head throbbed as his words rattled the inside of my brain. "Oh, Danny, you look like shit," he said as he put his hand on my shoulder. "Oh, I'm fine." I slapped his hand away, cold sweat pouring down my face. "Well, let's just get out of here and find my dad. Look, I'm fine." Brian didn't seem convinced, however. 5 minutes later, we were roaming the streets on bikes. I had my dad's bike, and Brian had my old bike that I hadn't used for about 5 years. God, it was insanely small. It was small for me when I was 14, and he actually looked hilarious. We took turns almost at random, keeping our general direction mostly northbound, mainly because I had a bad feeling he might have ended up at the bell tower. I could feel eyes on me. I kept looking all around me. Everybody seemed to be staring at me and looking away when I'd catch them. I don't know if I was becoming paranoid or if this was really happening. I shook my head and slapped my face, focusing on the road ahead as best I could. Brian was slowing us way down, almost kneeing himself in the face with every pedal. We cycled for hours, down countless streets. No sign of my dad or his car anywhere. We'd come to the northern part of Fort William, just before you leave the town to get to Ben Nevis. There's not much around. A few streets we tried and some wooded areas. There's a smallish retail part just before you exit the town. There's a couple of supermarkets there, so we stopped at the M&S food hall to pick up something to eat and some water to take with us. We had a few more hours until night time, so we needed some supplies. I chained the bikes together and we caught our breath before heading outside. "Oh, what a tune, man," Brian blurted out as we entered. "Somebody's Watching Me" by Rockwell played throughout the supermarket's PA system, a bit too loudly in my opinion. "Very apt for us," I laughed as I turned to Brian, who was grabbing a trolley. "We don't really need a trolley. I mean, we're not getting much." Well, Brian looked at me. "I don't care. I'm not carrying stuff." The supermarket was pretty empty, which I always prefer. God, I hate standing in queues. Before I knew it, Brian had whizzed away towards the deli aisle for some sandwiches. I headed straight for the snacks aisle, which was apparently at the other end of the shop. Well, I was walking fast, so I couldn't be dead sure, but passing the kitchenware aisle, for a split second, I could swear I saw Sean in my periphery, sliding a large blade from a knife block, staring right at me. I stopped and looked back. There was just some old guy looking at the label of a frying pan. Yes, I felt relieved, but that initial feeling of dread didn't fully go away. I found myself standing staring at the crisps, quietly singing along to the song and not being able to decide what I wanted to eat. Just as the iconic chorus sung by Michael Jackson kicked in, the lights above me flickered. I looked up. The music began to drown and fade, like I was rapidly being pulled into a tunnel. I heard something else. Humming. Someone behind me was humming with a little help from my friends by the Beatles. The hair on my neck stood up. I began feeling faint as my vision blurred. Danny, are you sure this is the right one? I froze in fear as I recognized Liam's voice. My legs began to give way. I turned to see Liam standing holding a live magpie in his hands. His face was swollen and red. It looked like multiple chunks of flesh had been ripped off. His eyes just stared me down as I slowly got lower. And out of nowhere, a large kitchen knife was plunged into the bird, all the way through and right through Liam's hand. Sean was standing laughing wildly. Well, Danny boy, is it? Liam's dead gaze never faltered. I felt a stabbing pain in my gut. I dropped to the ground, covering my eyes and screaming for help. A hand on my shoulder startled me, and I moved away down the aisle. Danny, what's wrong, man? What's going on? I opened my eyes and saw Brian standing in front of me looking worried. The music blared through the PA, and the supermarket seemed calm. Brian helped me up. Danny, tell me what's going on, man. Oh, this has happened twice today. I barged his shoulder as I shoved past him without saying a word. I just needed to get outside for some air. Brian was right behind me and grabbed me to turn me around. Danny, whatever's happening, you need to tell me, and you need to tell me now. I sighed and looked at the ground. I saw Liam and Sean in there. Earlier today, one of the policemen looked like that demon thing, and then I see Liam and Sean in M&S. Oh, I don't know what's going on, Brian, but this thing seems to be stalking me. People are going missing and nobody's saying anything about it. I don't know what's going on. I wish I did, but I don't. Brian just glared at me with a look of guilt on his face. I'm sorry, man. This feels like this never going to end. And it feels like it's spreading. I know what you mean, Brian said. We need to find out if there's a way we can put a stop to this for good. Find out about the history of the tower. Speak to anyone who's worked there for any reason. Maintaining the land, restoration work, or anything at all. We track them down. Anyone who's had any kind of history with the bell tower. We find out as much as we can about it. Look, you never know, Danny. We might just find out exactly what we're looking for. I nodded. Brian's little motivational speech was a valiant effort. We really do need to cling on to hope, but we also need to find my dad and make sure we avoid being taken ourselves. Look, I think I know where to start, I said proudly as I looked at Brian. Right, the bell tower fence has signs on it telling you not to go in or climb the fence. They're from a security company. There's always security companies looking after old buildings like that. I'm thinking we try them. I smiled, awaiting Brian's reaction to my brainwave. But he never smiled back. So, you mean we're going back there? He said, his voice shaking. No, Brian. Well, I mean, yes, but we're not going in. We're just going to get a name or number of the company in charge of the grounds. When Brian looked down at his feet, I don't want to go, Danny. Please don't make me go. Aye, but Brian, we need to. At least come to the woods with me and I'll go in myself. I swear we're not going any further than the fence. Brian thought for a few moments. All right, to the woods. I'm not going any further, Danny. I'm sorry. Right, to the woods. I'll be 5 minutes max. I hopped on my bike and led the way. The road was quiet and we seemed to get there in no time at all. Right, I'll go in. I'm walking up to the fence and turning back. I'll be no more than 10 minutes, I told Brian. Hey, I thought you said 5. I did, but it's probably about 5 minutes each way. I'll run. Look, I'll be quick, I promise. Okay, he said, seemingly annoyed, but we never had time to hang around arguing. I turned and ran through the woods. The bell tower quickly came into view, but that wasn't all. My dad's car sat just off to the side. The body was badly dented and the windows were all smashed. I stopped for a moment and stared. Well, there was nobody inside. Proceeding with extreme caution, I slowly made my way over to his car and looked inside. Oh, the seats were torn to shreds. I couldn't see a path into this area where a car would be able to get through. I mean, this made absolutely no sense. Then my phone buzzed. It was Brian. Hurry up, man. Something doesn't feel right out here, he said. I'm just coming. Brian hung up without saying anything else. I opened my camera and took 2 pictures of my dad's car. And then a shrill scream came from the bell tower. I walked back around to the front of the fence and looked from top to the bottom. I saw the door gently banging off the frame as it moved freely in the wind. A large section of it was completely gone. Nothing was holding it shut. It looked exactly as it had in my dream. No lock, no latch. Well, maybe that was it. I turned and bolted back through the woods, stopping myself after about 30 seconds. The security company, I said to myself. I quickly sprinted back and pulled my phone out to take a picture of the sign attached to the fence. And when I got there, Sean, Ash, and Dennis were standing in the doorway looking at me. I slowed almost to a halt. They just stared as I crept up to the fence and held out my phone to take a photo. I made sure to try and get them into the shot to show Brian when I got back. Sean waved me over. Danny boy, just come with us, man. You're only delaying the inevitable. Then they all laughed. I turned and ran back through the woods. I could see Brian waiting anxiously at the roadside, looking all around him. When I came out of the trees, Brian almost jumped out of his skin. I fucking shot myself there. Where were you? I mean, you said 10 minutes. That was like... He pulled out his phone. 13 minutes. Look, I went as fast as I could. Something's definitely going on, man. You're telling me? All I've had is shadows in the trees telling me to follow them. Well, that's the least of our worries right now. My dad's car is up at the bell tower, and I saw Sean, Ash, and Dennis up there. I explained, picking my bike up. Shit, what are they doing? How the hell did your dad's car get there? Surely that's impossible. Well, apparently not. They weren't doing much, just standing there trying to get me to go in. I got a picture of them and the car. Hey, did you get the security sign? Yep, got that too. I pulled my phone out to show Brian the pictures. My dad's car was the first. Oh, God, that's insane, man. I can't even imagine how that's possible, Brian said, sounding as shocked as ever. Me neither. Right, look at this one. I got the next picture of the security sign up. Where are they? Brian asked, scrutinizing the photo. What? God, they were in the doorway. I zoomed in. I swear, man, they were there. I looked, dumbfounded, at my phone. Almost had a heart attack when it rang in my hand. Oh, it's my mum, I said to Brian, rolling my eyes as I turned to walk away. Hello? I answered. Hi, son. It's Mum. Just to let you know, you can come home now. Your dad's back. Part 3. What do you mean he's back? I screeched down the phone. I mean, where is he? Is he in the house? I mean, he's back. I don't know what else could have... I possibly have meant. I know he's not come inside yet. I just saw him out the window sitting in the garden. Just thought I'd phone and let you know. I'm about to go out and see him. No! What? Don't go out, just stay inside, please. I had a horrible feeling she wasn't going to do what I told her, but I had to try my best. Just lock the doors and windows, don't let him in. Just don't let him in. I'm on my way now. Why have I not to let him in? What's going on, Danny? Just don't fucking let him in, please, Mum. Don't you speak to your mother like... Okay, I'm sorry, I interrupted. Can you just go and lock the doors now, please? And check the windows. You're scaring me, Danny. What's going... She trailed off as 3 loud knocks came at the door. Is that him? I whispered. 2 seconds. I'll go and look. Her nonchalant attitude was beginning to bug me. About 20 seconds had passed. Mum! I whispered loudly. It's him, but... Well, something's not right. Why doesn't he just come in? He's just standing there with his back facing the door. Danny, what's going on? I don't know. Just lock the door. I'll be there soon. Okay. Bye, she said as I heard the locks clicking and clacking through the phone. We rolled up slowly on our bikes. Brian was a bit behind me. The house came into view, but I couldn't see anyone in the garden. As I got closer, I could see the door was slightly ajar, and I began to worry. Brian saw too. Danny, you see that? Yeah, let's just be careful. I cautiously approached the doorway and noticed the wood had completely come away, like the 3 locks had burst right through the frame. I gently pushed the door open, with Brian practically on my back. I looked all around as we entered. I could only really see up the stairs, part of the living room and into the kitchen. We crept into the living room, and nothing seemed to be disturbed. A movement from above startled us both. I held my breath. Another movement. You should go up, Brian whispered. Oh, I don't think so. You go, I snapped back, keeping my voice hushed. The noise turned to what I can only describe as dragging footsteps. Just go to the front door. We can see up the stairs from there. I gestured for Brian to turn around and walk back to the hallway. The door was still wide open, good in case we needed to make a sharp exit. We quietly inched toward the bottom of the stairs, and as we got closer, I could see feet at the top. Another step forward revealed a pair of shins. We continued like this until I was able to see enough to confirm it was actually my mum at the top, just standing there listening, leaning forward a few inches as if that somehow improves her hearing. Oh, Mum, I nearly had a heart attack, I said as we all relaxed a little. Where is he? I asked. I don't know. He kicked the door in, so I ran upstairs and hid in the cupboard. She looked pretty shaken up. Well, how long ago did he leave? I don't know. I was upstairs. I couldn't hear anything. Right, okay, Mum. This is going to sound a bit crazy, but I really need you to believe me this time. I looked deep into her eyes, and she nodded with her mouth partially open. It's not Dad. That wasn't him that came here. It's something either possessing him or mimicking him. It's something from that bell tower. I saw her face change. She was losing interest. I'm serious, Mum. This isn't a joke. Dad's car is at the bell tower, all smashed up. Look. I pulled up the pictures and showed her, and her jaw dropped slightly more. So, is he in the tower? She asked, stuttering. I don't know. I don't think so, but we need to do something to stop all this happening. People around us are disappearing and it needs to stop. She looked at Brian then. Is this all true, Brian? Please don't play games. It's true, all of it. I've seen it myself, Brian answered, turning to go back to the living room. Mum scoffed, shaking her head, and walked away. Danny. We all froze in fear. I looked up the stairs. My dad was standing at the top, black pulsing veins wrapping his face, his yellow eyes like laser beams, and felt like they could have blinded me. Danny boy. he growled as he took one step down. I turned to my mum and Brian, who both stood still like petrified wood with their mouths gaping. "Oh, run!" I screamed, and I turned and bolted out the door, grabbing the bike. Brian was right behind me and shot off almost instantly. My mum came scurrying out, constantly looking behind her while she wailed in terror. "Come on, jump on," I ordered. She quickly got on the bike seat and gripped onto me, and I stood up on the pedals and pushed with everything I had. Then the chain came off, and we both fell in a heap on the ground. I looked at Brian first, who'd pulled over and was shouting for us to get up. Then I looked at the front door of my house. My dad was standing within the frame, almost crouching because he'd grown taller. His body looked like writhing vines wrapping themselves around him. His legs had contorted in a way that having knees wouldn't allow, and his face leaked a dark yellow and brownish fluid from every orifice. His mouth foamed and spat in anger as he stomped onto the porch with his twisted legs that almost looked like the roots of a tree. "Get back here, Brian, and get my mum," I called over, still struggling to process what was right in front of me. Brian cycled over and was there in a flash, and he helped my hysterical mum onto the seat. "What are you going to do?" Brian asked, slowly backing away from the advancing beast. "I don't know. It doesn't matter, just get her out of here now. I'll meet you at your house." My mum was visibly trembling as she climbed onto Brian's bike and they cycled off. I stood up and faced my dad. He'd stopped in the middle of the garden. A menacing low-end growl slowly escaped his lips, and he smiled his widest and stood up to full stretch. He looked about 8 or 9 feet tall, his long arms almost down to his knees. "Come and give your old dad a hug, son," he said in a crackled, demonic tone. I turned and ran as fast as I could down the street, screaming for help, screaming for anybody. He gave chase, every one of his strides seeming to move the earth. I turned the first corner and almost got smacked by a car. I stood panting with my hands on the bonnet. Well, the driver looked terrified. I probably looked like a murderer on the run. "Help me, please." Well, the driver just stared at me, looking panicked. He threw the car into gear and reversed. I crumpled onto the road and rolled over onto my back. I just lay there, breathing rapidly, staring at the sky. The clouds gave me the feeling I was moving. Raindrops began to patter onto my head. I must have been lying there for about 5 minutes, and nothing had happened. Finally, I got up myself to my feet, and I noticed how empty the streets were as I looked around. I could hear nothing but the breeze. I rounded the corner onto my street. Nothing there. I began to feel my body relax, my muscles loosen, and my mind felt relieved. Cautiously, I crept up towards my house. I could see my bike lying in the driveway. The door to the house was flapping wildly, opening and banging shut non-stop, and there was barely even any wind. I hopped over the fence and shot in to grab the bike. I picked it up, and then the door was still slamming behind me. I looked around, and the breeze had picked up. The silence of the empty streets was unnerving. I fixed the chain and cycled off in the direction of Brian's house. The rain had started to pick up now, and the streets seemed cold. Brian's face was pressed against the window when his house came into view. He saw me and waved me over. I saw my mum's head behind him, peeking over his shoulder. I practically leapt off the bike and ran inside. Brian and my mum had cups of tea and biscuits ready. "Oh, glad to see you two are all nice and cozy," I gestured. Brian's house was warm, and I was grateful for the heat. "The kettle's just boiled. Help yourself," Brian said. "Oh, I'm good. We need to get a hold of these security people, see what information we can drag out of them." "Well, what are you going to ask them?" Brian asked with a mouthful of biscuits. "I don't know, but something about the door not being able to close might be the key here. I saw something like that in my dream, the door flapping around wildly after Sean kicked it in. Then they were all standing at the door in the picture I tried to take. I don't know, but it's the best idea I have right now." I got the picture of the sign up on my phone and zoomed in. "Nevis Security. Taking security to new heights. 0139 7701 333. I looked confused at the sign. New Heights, I laughed, looking at Brian. I've literally never seen a single security guard or vehicle anywhere near there. What a great security company, Brian said sarcastically, shaking his head before having a drink of his tea. Anyway, let's phone him, I said, punching the number into my phone. What's this for? Who is it you're phoning? My mum butted in. It's a long story, and we don't have time, I replied, listening to the ringing intently, waiting for someone to answer. Nevis Security? A male voice came from the receiver. Yeah, hi, my name's John. I'm wondering if you can help me out with some information about the old bell tower, near Ben Nevis. What kind of information? The guy sounded stern, almost unfriendly. We were, wondering who owns the grounds, or even that building. The building and the grounds are owned and operated by the council, sir. We just make sure nobody gets in there. That's dangerous, he said proudly. I could almost imagine him sitting with his chest puffed out. I rolled my eyes and glanced at Brian. Okay, well, I saw some kids up there, and it looks like they've snapped the lock and the latch off, so the door's just wide open now. There was a long pause. He came back after about 60 seconds. Hi there. Sorry for the wait. I'm just going to put you through to my manager. He'd like to have a word with you if that's okay. Okay, no problem. Hold the line, please, sir. After a few minutes of this horrible plinky-plunky music, another man answered. His voice was more alert and intimidating. Hello there, sir. I'd like to know what it is exactly you saw at the bell tower. I don't know why, but I felt very reluctant to tell this guy anything. Well, I saw 3 kids, or more like 3 teenagers. They were standing in the doorway, and a large section of the door had been broken. It was just flapping about in the wind, I explained, not knowing what to expect. Did you not recognize any of them? He asked sharply. Well, no, I didn't recognize any of them, I lied. Okay, we'll need to make a quick report, then we'll get somebody out there to secure the building. Just a few quick questions, is that alright, sir? Yes, fine. Yes. Superb, he said, and I could almost hear him smiling. I walked into the kitchen to get away from the incessant slurping of tea. The security manager kept talking. Okay, so, where did the incident take place? Bell tower. Okay, I've got that. So when did this happen? What date and roughly what time? I was going through my mind trying to figure out what was happening here. All I wanted was information about the building, and suddenly I'm filing some reports. It was yesterday, probably about noon. I just said the first thing that came to mind. Great. And there were 3 teenagers? Yeah, 3. Okay, and you said you didn't recognize any of them. Was there anything else to note? Anything suspicious nearby? No. You hesitated a little bit there. Are you sure? Yeah, I'm sure. What about your dad's car? I froze. I felt cold. Sorry? I asked shakily. Come on, Danny boy. Your dad's car was there all smashed up. I know it was, because it was me who fucking smashed it up. His voice began to change now. I can't believe you didn't recognize me, your old pal. How could you not recognize me, Danny boy? I'm so hurt. And then he let out an overly sarcastic cry. Sean? I gasped. My voice cracked and trembled. He just laughed like a maniac until I eventually ended the call. I staggered back into the living room, feeling dazed and confused. My eyes felt hot. What did they say? Brian asked. I just stood there staring. What, are you okay, son? My mum looked worried. Yeah, I'm fine, it's just... It wasn't the security. I was struggling to find my words. What does that even mean? Brian asked with a look of contempt. The security people... They're not them. The guy put me onto a manager, then out of nowhere I was talking to... Well, to Sean. Brian stood up. Oh, shit. He put his hand on his forehead. We need to go to the Highland Council. The site's owned by them. Maybe they know something. What if it's just a bunch of Seans there too? Brian snapped back. Then I don't know. I know it has something to do with that door. The door needs to be sealed. We just need to find someone who can help. Hey, easier said than done, Brian said, grabbing his jacket. Mum, you'll have to just stay here. We'll go to the council building, see if there's anyone we can speak to. I'll phone if anything happens. Okay, she said, a tear streaming down her cheek, and she gave both of us a hug. The air around town seemed thick, like it was difficult to draw a full breath. We cycled to the council building as fast as we could. It's inside an industrial estate that seemed a little too on the quiet side. There was something eerie about it. I opened the door to what appeared to be the normal bustling council HQ. I scanned the sign at the reception desk. Council house repairs, pest control, housing applications and rent inquiries, register births, deaths and marriages. Planning and building standards. That should be it, desk 7. I scanned the large open plan office building. And a tall slender man with a round head and small round spectacles sat by a desk with a huge number 7 on the front. One of us should stay and keep an eye out, I suggested. Brian looked at me. Hey, I'll go over, he said. You sure? I don't mind. I'll do it. I'll ask about getting the door sealed and see if there's any information about what's going on. If anything like this has ever happened before or whatever. Right, okay. I'll just keep watch then. If anything dodgy happens, I'll come and get you. Ryan shuffled over, looking like a nervous wreck, and sat down. The man's beady eyes seemed to be constantly darting around the room as he spoke. Something about him just seemed shifty. I scanned the room because I could feel eyes on me from somewhere. I kept catching these haunting grins in my periphery, but as I looked around, it seemed that nobody was actually looking at me. I felt like I was going mad. Brian swiftly came back over. Okay, so he told me the bell tower has a particularly dark and bloody history, and was used by occultists for some kind of brutal rituals or ceremonies and stuff, years and years ago. Apparently one of these rituals caused the building to collapse, and only the bell tower remained. Something intensely evil has been sealed inside for God knows how long. He said if the door isn't sealed, well, he doesn't actually know, but he said it's been a priority of the council for decades to keep that door sealed, pretty much forever. Brian then looked around the room. I have a bad feeling in here. He's getting one of the managers to get a hold of the people who sealed the door before. I don't know if it's some religious thing or, well, whatever it is, but hopefully... We were interrupted by a tall, well-dressed man in a side office calling Brian's name. That must be him, Brian said, quickly turning away. Right in here, sir. The man gestured to the inside of the office with a friendly smile and a nod. Then Brian disappeared inside. I scanned the room again, checking everyone out. Something wasn't sitting right. I then looked back at the door Brian had just entered. The guy was still standing there smiling and just staring at me. Hairs all over my body stood on end. His mouth grew wider and his eyes flashed a bright yellow as he turned and darted into the office, slamming the door behind him. Part 4. I dashed for the office door and grabbed at the handle. The door rattled in the frame, but it wouldn't budge. Everyone turned to look at the crazy guy screaming and frantically kicking and punching a door. I turned around. Most people looked shocked, others not so much. I felt like I could tell exactly who was real and who was not in that moment. After about 15 seconds, 2 heavy-set security officers were bounding towards me. I had nowhere to run. I didn't know what was going to happen. I closed my eyes as they grabbed me, the darkest of thoughts crossing my mind as I felt my feet dragging along the smooth tiled floor. Thrown in a heap on the rough ground, I heard cars and people talking. I opened my eyes and was genuinely surprised to find I'd been ejected from the building and told not to come back. I beat my head with my hands. Oh, fuck. I sat on the tarmac, just staring at the door. God, I'm so sorry, Brian, I muttered to myself. I sat there for 10 minutes, trying to calm myself down, just staring at the door. Not a single person went in or came out. I pulled my phone out and called my mum as I grabbed my bike. I stood ready to go while the phone continued to ring. I then tried again and she answered almost immediately. Oh, sorry, I was making tea. Is everything okay? She asked in a frantic voice. No, it's not. I'm coming to get you now. We need to get out of here as soon as possible. Grab anything from Brian's we might need. Food, bottles of water, weapons, anything you can find that might be of any use. I'll be there soon. Cycling on a bike was in no way ideal. We would need to find a car or something. My brakes squealed as I skidded almost into Brian's building. I ran inside to find my mum sitting looking nervous, holding a bag. Everything we need's in here. Where's Brian? She asked, looking behind me and out of the window. Brian disappeared. I think he got caught, I replied, not wanting to say too much. She cupped her hand over her mouth. Oh, God. We really need to go. This place isn't safe anymore. My mum nodded and threw the bag over her back, and we left to get on the bike. I cycled to Sean's house. Seeing his car parked outside gave me some hope. Surely his keys would still be inside. All I'd have to do is just go in. Stay here on the bike. Stay hidden. If you see anyone, don't let them see you. Don't make any noise. I'll be back in 5 minutes. She reluctantly agreed, looking at the ground. I'll be right back, I promise. She looked at me with sad eyes. I then turned and crossed the road, and the wind slapped my face and clouds began to draw in. Sean's door looked splintered and cracked as if someone had been trying to break it down. It was unlocked, surprisingly. I opened the door and the smell reminded me of somewhere I'd rather be able to forget. Hot, musty air filled my lungs. Walking quietly down the hall, every noise had me on edge. The hall opened up into the living room at the end, and it appeared to have been completely ransacked. Everything was turned upside down and strewn across the floor. Everything but the small coffee table in the center. I tried to focus in the dim light. There was something on the coffee table. It was Sean's keys. Immediately I felt threatened just by their presence, so perfectly placed in the middle, like they were waiting for me. Something else was happening here. I lightly stepped over the stuff on the floor, looking all around me, waiting for something. I just didn't know what. I picked up the keys, trying to stop them jangling in my hand. I looked all around me again, still nothing there. Carefully I retraced my steps back to the hallway. The hall seemed darker now. I could barely see the end. I could tell the door was still open. The urge to sprint for it was mounting fast, but I still didn't want to make any noise. Floorboards squeaked under my feet, and my heart pounded every time I approached one of the doors leading into the rooms. They were all closed. At any moment I expected one of them to burst open and for me to be dragged inside. But nothing happened. I made it to the door, and I left. I then triumphantly walked outside and unlocked the car. Still feeling dubious, I made sure to check everywhere in the car and even under it before waving my mum over. She ditched the bike and climbed in the back seat and lay down with the bag. This all seemed a little, well, too easy. Those keys had been there for a reason. What that reason was, I didn't give a shit. The fact is, I now had a car, and whatever it wanted me to do, if anything, I wasn't doing it. I was going to get my foot down and leave Fort William behind. I then looked up to Sean's window. He was standing there looking out from the room I was in no less than a minute ago, waving at me with an evil-looking grin. I smiled back and threw up my middle finger at him just as I hit the accelerator. "Oh, Danny, watch out!" my mum cried. I slammed on the brakes. Ashwin and Dennis were standing in the middle of the road, only a few feet from the car, laughing. Their jagged facial features contorted and twisted to almost resemble the clown in a way. It was then I noticed they were actually wearing the clown's outfits, and they began taking steps towards us. Their arms and fingers grew longer and more pointed. I pulled the car into reverse and slammed my foot down. In my rear view, I saw my dad. His massive form seemed to have grown out of control now, like he could barely carry himself. He staggered along the road, cracking the asphalt beneath him with each step, the road itself burning and crumbling under him. I stopped the car again. Well, I had enough room to maneuver around the other two, not so much my dad. So I threw it into gear and started screaming along the road. I had the urge to just hit them, but I didn't want to damage the car. Or maybe that's what they wanted. Their smiles growing wider as I approached. The urge was building. Just before I was about to make some Ash and Dennis bolognese, I turned the steering wheel and rounded them without incident. My mum screamed, but we were on our way. The streets were almost empty. There were some normal-looking people around, but not many. Maybe only a few cars and vans. I stopped and took out my phone. I opened maps and found the nearest city was Glasgow, 74 miles away. Well, the plan was, get there, get a hotel, and just try to forget about Fort William. Start again somewhere else. There was nothing I could do anymore. The town seemed to be dead, as if everyone had left, or, well, something worse. Do you need anything from the back? Anything to eat or drink? My mum asked from the back seat. No, I'm too anxious, so we just need to get out of here. We go to Glasgow to stay in a hotel for a couple of nights. We'll see what happens from there. Oh, do you mind if I sleep? I'm drained, son, she said with her eyes already closed. Ah, that's fine. We should be there in a couple of hours, I told her, starting the engine back up. Oh, that feeling of seeing the sign, "You're now leaving Fort William," gave me the shivers. I couldn't look back now. I might be labelled a coward or a bad friend, but there was literally nothing I can do. I can't go and seal the door myself. I can't save anyone now but myself and my mum. The drive was over so fast. No stops, nothing. It was almost 10 p.m. when we pulled into a Premier Inn car park. The city was bright and busy. Hundreds of people just walking around everywhere, not giving one solitary fuck about anyone or anything else. Well, he must have looked like we'd been dragged backwards through hell. We made our way to the reception to check in. The guy at the desk was called Brian. It genuinely crushed me, even just seeing his name, and to think what might have happened to him in that room. Oh, just 2 rooms, please. Any 2 rooms, I said, and my voice sounded coarse. Certainly, sir. Do you prefer the rooms near each other? He replied with a warm, inviting smile. Just anything. If there's 2 near each other, then yeah, well, it doesn't really matter. I was trying to be as polite as possible despite how exhausted I was. I needed to get to bed and rest. The receptionist charged my card and promptly handed over 2 key cards and directed us to our rooms. 2 floors up, and both rooms right next to each other. I threw the bag over my shoulder and my mum put her arm around me. She seemed unsteady and also exhausted like myself. We got to her room where I took her in and helped her onto the bed. Right, get some sleep if you can. We'll figure out what we're going to do tomorrow. She just nodded and lay back with her eyes already closed. I quietly left her room and went to mine. Oh, it was nice and cold, fresh. I turned on the TV, chucked the bag on the floor, and then went straight into the shower. Oh, the water felt amazing. I felt like I'd been running a marathon through mud, and the piping hot shower was relaxing every single muscle in my body. After my shower, I put on some shorts and a t-shirt. I lay back and let out a long overdue exhale. The stress and anxiety drained from my body and mind, and I finally felt like I could breathe normally. I put on the news to see if anything was being reported on, but nothing. I did a Google search, checked Facebook, Twitter. Not a single post or article about Fort William. I can't quite say how I felt about that. Then, listening to BBC News 24, my eyes began feeling heavy. I sank deeper into my pillow. I was on a bike, cycling through the streets of Fort William. An intense feeling of déjà vu overcame me. I saw flashes of images like a strobe effect or possibly even a lightning storm. It was raining. I saw the bell tower. The ground beneath heaved as if it were breathing, and its breathing was in time with my own. I felt drawn to the tower. I saw an image of Liam's emaciated body on the floor of the 5th floor. The door to the bell tower was slamming with force. It broke. The splintered wood got sucked inside and a deafening roar emanated from the building. The bells began to ring. I saw Sean's face grinning from his living room window and waving me off. I saw Sean's car keys on the small square table. Ash and Dennis smashing my dad's car as his dead body lay inside, almost torn apart. I cycled on and on. The bells were getting louder and louder as the rain got heavier. I suddenly realized where I was. I was cycling to Brian's house. As his house came into view, Brian's face was pressed against the window. He saw me and waved me over. I saw my mum's head behind him, peeking over his shoulder. She was smiling. Her eyes began to glow like two fiery beacons, and black veins became visible on her face. Brian had no idea. The bells rang even louder. My ears could barely withstand the noise. I stopped dead on the bike. The rain poured down my face as I just stared at them. I woke up with a start to knocking on my room door. I was soaked in sweat. The bells were still chiming, and they grew louder as I checked my phone. Midnight. Another knock at the door. "Danny, it's me," my mum called. "Can you hear the bells? Oh, please let me in, Danny. I'm scared." I got out of the bed and hastily walked to the door. I grabbed the door handle and then I stopped myself. I remembered her standing behind Brian with that grotesque face. I looked out of the peephole. She was standing a couple of feet back. Her face was twisted and jagged, and looked like it was melting. She raised her hand and waved with her long, black-pointed fingers, sporting talon-like claws. "There you are." She grinned, her voice getting noticeably deeper. She knew I was looking. I took a step back from the door. Feeling panicked, my breathing rate increased dramatically. The door shook. The ground shook. "Let me in, son. It's time. There's nowhere to run now." Her voice sounded demonic and guttural. I continued walking backwards until I tripped and fell onto the bed. "Oh, the bag," I said to myself, realizing what I'd tripped on, thinking there could be something useful inside. I opened it. It was just packed full of Polaroids. They spilled out all over the floor. Pictures of everyone. Liam, Sean, my parents, Ash, Dennis, Brian. All of them shackled to the beds from that room on the 1st floor, being tortured and their bodies being ripped to shreds. Pictures of me in various locations within the tower and in the streets. A picture of the keys on Sean's table. The fucking keys. Wanted me to take the keys. I thought I was getting away when all along it wanted me to take it somewhere else. And I've just driven it to the biggest city in Scotland. What have I done? I sat slumped on the floor. There was nowhere to hide now. The door's beginning to break, and it's only a matter of time before it gives way. I can see the cracks appearing all over. If this is the last thing I ever write, then I want this to be a warning to every one of you. Do not ever go to Fort William under any circumstances. For your own sake, stay away. If there's anyone reading this right now, should you ever find yourself in Scotland, I recommend you pay a visit to my hometown of Fort William. If you're interested, we can even arrange to meet up. I have loads to show you. So there you go, my dear friends. That is the third and, as far as I know, the final part of the Bell Tower series. I've certainly really enjoyed reading that. Hope you've been able to put up with my terrible Scottish accents for the characters. I don't know. Been around Scottish people all my life, so hopefully it's not terribly, terribly awful. And it was a lot of fun to play around doing those characters. Awesome story. Had me creeped out every episode all the way through, and I hope it was the same for you. Well, that's the Monday. Back again here on Wednesday with another long story, hopefully. So then, my dear friends, very, very sweet dreams, and bye-bye. Thank you so much for taking the time to listen to this story today. Really means a lot to me and to the author of the story, of course. Well, if you want to know more about me, I'm pretty much everywhere on social media. You can find me on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. You can download my music on SoundCloud. I've got a Patreon if you feel like. Throw me $1 or $2. Very much appreciated. And of course, on Reddit, I have a place where you can leave stories if you want me to read one that you've written. Well, hoping to see you all again very soon. Till then, sweet dreams, and bye-bye.